to the post-show discussion and Q&A. I hope you all enjoyed what you've seen so far. It's been pretty exciting for us here as well, as you guys have been inspired already just watching things. And you're already cooking a new ascendancy class.
Yeah, for sure.
You've got to do design whenever you can.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's been a few fun moments here already. But I'm your host, Ziggy D, and I'm joined by Jonathan and Mark to talk about everything you've seen. Honestly, it's so much.
I mean, we were really keen to make sure that when we went into early access that people didn't feel like it was just, limping along and kind of, just like a minimum amount of content. We really wanted to kind of blow people away. So hopefully people feel like, there is enough content. Because, it was certainly a mission to get all that stuff in.
Yeah, I did come here expecting that there would be, maybe a basic mapping placeholder endgame and your 3 acts and, the half the classes. But you've made a decision here clearly that's got the core PoE player community in mind.
Absolutely. So, I mean, we have to make sure, look, Path of Exile's endgame is kind of known for the fact that you get to choose between different types of content and that, some people enjoy one thing, some people enjoy another. And I feel like that choice is, a huge part of what makes it good. So if we didn't have that when we entered endgame, then I don't think that would be, that wouldn't be a Path of Exile endgame. So that's kind of what we have to make sure of. So we kind of said, okay, well, what is the minimum number of, different endgame things you need to be able to have in order to be able to actually have a viable endgame that we feel like you get different choices. And that's how we ended up with what we have here.
I definitely feel like a lot of games nowadays release, and their campaign's intact and real good. You get to the end game and it just falls real flat.
Yeah.
And it was certainly a very important moment for us when we were like, hold on, that's the wrong thing to do. Let's not make the same mistake as everyone else. Let's pivot. And we actually did that, and it made a world of difference and made the game all of a sudden, 100 times bigger with an infinite amount more content, right?
It was definitely hard though, because so we're progressing. It's like we would have made it. We would have gotten all these acts in if we hadn't have changed direction. It's to actually say, we're going to specifically not finish this content that we'll be working on, it's like pins down everyone. We're stopping work on this. We're going to move over to endgame because it's actually more important. That was certainly a hard one.
That would have been some whiplash there, I imagine.
For sure. Well, I mean, it's suddenly the whole, environment art team, it's they're all just whatever you're working on, just scrap. You don't want to scrap, but, just stop it. we're doing something else now. So
saving clothes, yeah.
Especially for a lot of the developers, because you got to also think, a lot of our developers have just been working on this campaign for, what is it now, 6 years?
I think it's even longer, actually.
Yeah, it's just this epic journey, whereas none of them, a lot of these people haven't been working on Path of Exile 1 this whole time, so some of us are we're just churning out endgame with every league and doing all of that, but for a lot of these people, a lot of these developers, it was quite jarring to swap over, but everyone embraced it. We talked about it, everyone was happy about it and stoked about it, and it just ended up coming out real awesome. So
I think it's landed well, and it definitely kind of blew me away when you. So even before I saw anything, we were in the car on the drive here, and you were just info dumping all of the end game. You're like, oh, we got this feature, we got this feature. I'm getting dopamine just from hearing about it. I haven't even seen anything yet. But do you guys feel like you're competing against yourselves a little bit here? Because Path of Exile's kind of set the bar. The original game has set the bar for what is available to endgame in a game like this, and it makes it's not acceptable really to launch with just nothing in terms of endgame now.
Absolutely. I mean, I mean, if you're not competing with yourself, then I don't think you're going to make good progress, right? So that's what you really have to do.
Yeah, but cracking that out for beta even.
Absolutely.
Pretty
well,
exciting.
as I said, I just think it would not have landed nearly as well without that. And I think it's important that our existing Path of Exile 1 community feels like they're also served. Sure, we're doing all this stuff for new players, and that's really important, and that'll expand the audience. But, if we launched and all the PoE 1 players are unhappy, that wouldn't be good. So, we have to make sure that they also feel like, they've got a game for both them and for all the new players we hope to bring to the genre.
And you definitely want all those different axes as well. Just having 2, right? You'll get a lot of content can be immediately divisive, right? Obviously, that's the nature of it. That's how it goes, right? And so you have all of these different avenues because there are different players who like different types of content. So if you're just here's your one end game system, well, immediately then there is a portion of players who are just I don't want this, right? And so having all of these options is ultra key, and that is what Path of Exile 1 has taught us. And again, it's I'd say lessons learned, for the genre, and it is expanding in other games and stuff. But certainly, as you said, competing with ourselves, yes, PoE 1 has 40 axes, and we've got 7 really good ones here, and obviously more to come. But 7 is a lot, mind you.
Especially when it's all like, people have to learn a lot of things again. It's going to be very interesting to see how long it takes people to do the kind of difficulty 4 pinnacle content. It's like we have to. It's honestly like we actually don't even really know, because like you never know what people are going to find in terms of builds and so on. Like I'm hoping that it will take people a while to be able to work it out, but you never know. Maybe end of day 1, people just be like, oh yeah, easy, no problem, mate. Could be what it's like.
We have a few people that are doing that sort of thing. I saw like a solo self found level 100 in 24 hours or something.
Jeez. Okay, this is where we've got it now, is it?
So but I imagine there'll be a little bit of a soft reset there for people.
For sure.
A relearning period.
There's stuff to learn.
And I mean, PoE 2 has changed a lot over the years, so more than 5 years of development now. And what was that initial pitch when PoE 2 was first put forwards, like, as to what it's going to be? Because it was much smaller in scope originally.
Yeah, so when we started, it wasn't even a sequel. It was just we're just updating the character rigs, and over time, it kind of feature creeped into a proper sequel. But the thing that we were saying is, whenever we were talking about it, and I guess this is the main thing, is that we're like, okay, when we make an area here, it needs to be that there's like a theme for it. It feels unique from everything else. We're not going to just like have recycled stuff like within the campaign that just feels like, oh, we just took this area and modified it slightly. Each one's got to have its own stuff. It's got to have monsters that were like carefully thought about, that like, fit in with the world. And it's got to have bosses that are actually like good tier quality, and every area is going to have one. So those decisions have kind of been things that have meant that they really raised the quality bar to a level that took us way longer than we even really expected. Like those things there, just like it's huge, right? Like honestly, I feel like we underestimated significantly what it would take to deliver that level of quality.
I remember really early on, a battle I fought for, and I mean like way back, was like, if you think back to, say, Diablo 2, which obviously still holds a lot of, power in terms of design motivations and philosophy and stuff within the company, you get things like the super uniques, and PoE 1 did them, and it's just like, here's a boss with 1 or 2 skills. And I remember very, very, very early on in PoE 2, I'm like, I want every single boss to be memorable and a thing. I don't want a unique monster that's just like dies in 2 seconds and uses heavy strike and has a fancy name. And I remember, I even got some push.
Poor Caliph.
I remember getting some pushback at the time and thinking like, I love the bosses, my favorite part of everything. And so I was just like, man, I don't want this. This is just terrible. But of course, that decision, me pushing for that, me wanting that, turned into this megalithic.
What have you done?
Now we have 50, aiming to be 100. Honestly, probably later, several more 100 once all the end games, everything start to evolve and more expansions comes out. And I'm like, we maybe just made 100 times more work for ourselves, but 100% bloody worthwhile, because I'd say those bosses are one of the main attraction pieces of the game, and anyone who plays it is just like, holy crap, those boss fights are amazing. So like, obviously some are bad and some are good to different people and all that. That's how it all goes. That's part of all the fun. But it is true that me pushing for that thing literally created thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of work. Now, worthwhile work, but it is again that exact thing of like, the scope was kind of small on numerous axes, and as we just raised the quality bar to what we thought was good, it certainly went from, what was it initially, just reskinning some character classes and new rigs or whatever, into this like mega scale entire campaign, everything. But
full standalone separate game. Yeah.
Fun other anecdote, since we went out of that territory. It was originally codenamed Project Chimera.
What? I don't.
It was this pipe dream.
I've never been a fan of these codename things.
It was this like, there were times way back in the original Office, there was all this like, sometimes there'll be a feature you can't really do in PoE 1, and it was always like, we'll do it in Project Chimera. That was like amongst the developers, and people were like, what the heck is that? Now, ironically, there is a boss in Act 3 called, well, it's got a different name, but it's called the Chimera internally. It is a chimera. It's a multi-headed beast, and you've seen it in a few of the marketing, things here and here, different trailers, little snippets of it. And I think it's just ironic that was actually the first boss asset made before everything, the first monster, because back in when we used to just make random monsters and we'll find out how to use them. And that was made for that game. It was used in the original PoE 2 trailer, right? It is the only incomplete, technically, but only from a balance standpoint, or it was the last boss to finish in the entire Path of Exile campaign right now.
It sounds like there was like some sort of emotional demon that you had to battle there, of like the legacy of the original idea, and you had to finish it.
We had a moment with the monster game designers where we're like, oh my god, it's happening, the Chimera is finally being finished. Holy, this is like, yeah, we were effectively like, we need to celebrate this boss finally being done. It was like at the origin, and now it's at this, point where we're about to deploy early access. Not to say the end, because the end is forever away.
Yeah. Yeah, it's still the beginning of a journey in many ways. Huh?
Yep.
But on that note of celebrating, like, how do you guys feel having now kind of, for the first time, I feel really like laid bare kind of everything you have, you're putting it out there, and only being 2 weeks away from everyone playing it?
Well, it's always scary, coming into a release, and I think especially for, there's like a bunch of people on the PoE2 team who have, who like they have, this is their first game that they're going to be releasing, and that experience is something that, it's tough. And honestly, I think that even we were feeling a little bit cocky actually about the fact, because we release content for PoE1 all the time, and I feel like we kind of felt like we knew what it took to get a game released, but honestly, like PoE2 was just a whole entirely different demon as far as getting things out, right? Like, it's just way more difficult. Like, when you actually have to make everything, like the whole frickin' thing right from the ground up again, it's like, wow, there's way more stuff there. And like, there's even things like the passive tree, where it's like, I feel like we underestimated what it would take to get something like that to an actual releasable state. Like, that was a huge amount of work, just like absolutely colossal to get it to get that kind of stuff in shape. Like, it's just been crazy. Obviously it's nerve wracking, coming up to a release day. But I think we do have something that players are going to really enjoy, and it's always comforting when we had a live event in LA recently. People, we got to the time limit and everyone's like, oh man, we don't want to stop. So like I think people are going to really enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. It's been a whole different experience for me here playing this time around as well, whereas before I was playing a very buggy kind of internal version of the game that was very experimental. Now playing almost what I'm going to be playing in
Well, I heard you still managed to blow the count up the elevator with some kind of knockback bug.
I wasn't going to mention that.
Yeah, we have to get that one.
I did send the Act 1 boss up an elevator with knockback. It was good.
Intended mechanic.
I thought it was pretty funny.
Yeah.
He was in his like big wolf form and kind of trapped in there, so just barking at me through the wood. It's good. So a few little, I'm sure there's a few things to work out over this next 2 weeks. I hope the team can have a little bit of a rest for a day before they get back into it, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a lot. So you've done that pivot to the endgame focus and got so much for us now to play around with in the beta. And it seems like originally I was thinking, we might be playing for a few weeks here, and then maybe going back over to some Path of Exile 1 stuff. But it seems like you guys want us playing through Christmas.
That would certainly be good. Look, there's enough stuff there. I think it will take people a long time to get through.
Yep.
And obviously, it's also going to be the first time people are playing through a completely fresh campaign as well. I think that will take people a fair amount of time. There's and then of course the end game as well to explore. It should be pretty significant. We've always wanted it to be that Path of Exile 2 leagues, are going to be, like how PoE1 leagues are, where you play them for a reasonable amount of time, and then sure, you get done with them eventually, and then you've got the next content that comes out. So in order to be able to realize that, you have to have enough of a base to make that happen.
Yeah, people are definitely wondering how invested they can get in the beta. So I definitely want to ask a few questions kind of around that idea. Firstly, is there going to be wipes and resets, and will there be something before launch as well?
So we are going to be having new leagues effectively throughout the beta whenever we launch something significant, because we want to make sure that all of the effectively that people are able to play through. But that stuff will be merged into an early access league, and effectively after we go into full release, that league will stick around. Now, I can't promise that everything about your character will function exactly like how it did in that thing.
I imagine it will be a glorious kind of snapshot of all of the here's all the broken stuff. Yeah.
But effectively, we can contain all that stuff in the sort of early access league, and then if you still want to play those characters, then you can go right ahead and do that. But the action is always going to be in whatever the most recent league is, and then of course after that point, there'll be a standard that everything goes into, which all our economic sins will forevermore be archived in the in standard. So that's. No doubt what will happen.
Well, it's nice that it's not going to be affecting what will be the standard league.
Yeah.
Also,
that's the idea.
People will be able to kind of get invested in their characters. Because,
absolutely.
There's even something kind of cool about the idea of making something that will be like that little historical piece.
Yeah, absolutely.
A little collectible.
Absolutely, and I'm sure there'll be some handful of legacy things that only exist in early access leagues. So I guess we'll have to see what gives a unique balance.
You talked about like the playing for a week or how long are we expecting?
Yeah.
Well, we also got to remember, and a lot of the PoE1 players will be thinking very differently to people who are obviously going to experience this as a new game, but it is a new game, right? You don't have all these predefined, hyper-refined builds to play to immediately, go through things. You don't have people coming in with like fully detailed 7 million line build guides of exactly what to do with what items. The discovery is going to be there. The discovery takes time, and the discovery is like honestly ultra fun for me. I love it.
Yeah.
Now, those things will emerge after time. Of course they do. Completely fine. But you just got to remember, like, there's a lot of game to play here to discover, to learn about the world, the new narratives, the new world building, the new unique items, the ascendancy classes, the massive passive tree, which is bigger than PoE1's, the, endgame systems, the bosses, it's not going to be this, I personally, when a PoE1 league comes out, for example, I play for like a month, sometimes a bit longer, sometimes a bit less. It ultimately also depends largely what's going on here and how much I need to invest here. So, and there are other people who play for more like 3 and whatnot, but there's certainly going to be a much longer time period you can play this for while still discovering new stuff and not feel like you're finished. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, of course, you see that's subjective. Everyone can pick their own point when they finish, but if you want to see everything and do everything, you're going to be investing a lot more time, especially these first-time rounds, and then obviously with every league, there's more to discover, but you get faster at doing all these parts over and over and over again. You'll get more efficient over time. That's how the game works. So, yeah, I'd expect a lot of time to be sunk into this to fully explore it to start with, like a lot, not a week, not 2 weeks. You're going to be going far, far longer than that if you want to see everything. But, it's up to you. Play at your own pace. See how you want to go. Learn at your own pace. That's the beauty of a new game as well, which we haven't been able to experience with Path of Exile 1, or other games and for so long, is actually discovering the entire world. And yeah, there's some familiar mechanics at the end game and stuff like that, which is awesome for people. But I certainly want to I'm very excited to see people discovering the new things and getting so excited about it.
I can tell you're amped for watching people go through that discovery process. I'm maybe even diving in yourself 100%. I love sitting there in Path of Building, as many of us do, but I am very excited for that.
That new
discovery process for a while.
I think you were saying how much you were part spreadsheet. I think I was saying I'm like maybe 60% spreadsheet, 40% discovery, and that's my play archetype. So
coming up with our player profiles, Timmy spikes and things like that for both of Exiled characters.
The discovery part of me is ultra excited, and I'll mind you, that's coming from someone who kind of knows all the content. I'm still, because there's something different about making it versus actually playing it live with the players, seeing them discover it, uniques being linked in chat and on Reddit and all of that is just so cool. So we're going to get a massive dose of that, and it is like genuinely exciting to just see how people are going to think, what's worth 1 chaos or what's worth 10 chaos, what's worth if chaos is even the metric.
Is chaos even the currency that people settle on?
We were arguing about this earlier.
I'm pretty sure that 1 C spam in chat might turn into 1 E, because 1 exalt, given that exalt is now...
I think it'll be chaos.
People probably...
ad remove will still be...
People don't appreciate, by the way, so when we say we've increased... you're going to be getting multiple exalts in Act 1. In PoE2, we actually have increased that a lot. It isn't just like an idle,
I can see exalts becoming the new kind of like chaos.
I think
chaos being the new divines.
I actually agree. But we'll see.
That's my point.
But it's a new economy, right? Who even knows? The market will have to.
But I like that we're already arguing about this. It's good fun. So, do you have some kind of beta release roadmap for updates and things like that for people to look forward to?
We certainly did have one 6 months ago when we were, now that we're sort of getting to release, it's like, oh my god, we have to look at it. So, look, I don't think it'll be any less than 6 months. I think it could easily end up being more. I certainly don't want to. Look, 2025. I think really want to be full release in 2025. I don't really want to be spending more than a year. That would be pretty crazy. But I mean, honestly, like we have to get all the content finished and all that sort of stuff. We always feel like we underestimate these things, and of course we have to learn what we need to learn. We have to get the game to the point when it is really fun. We have to make sure that like all of the things like we've got the difficulty right for all the players, we've got the economy right, like all the stuff. I mean, there's a lot of things that we have to sort out. And so I kind of have a feeling that the first few weeks at least are going to just be scramble of like, oh crap, someone like worked this crazy thing out and we found this thing, and like that's always scary, because it's just when we add content to PoE1, it's like at least the kind of base of stuff that we have is kind of well tested and people know kind of what's going on with it. But here it's like just complete new world, and we're the kind of game that has a lot of ability for players to do stuff that we wouldn't anticipate. We have just the way support gems work and everything like that. So there's certainly a lot of worry that like there's just going to be builds that are like completely ridiculous that we just never anticipated, combining certain things in different ways we don't expect. With hundreds of support gems, it can be like that. So that's going to be an interesting one.
It will happen.
Yeah, for sure.
It is inevitable, right? Like there's nothing we can even do about it because you need hundreds and thousands of hours of testing to be able to do that with what can only be done with hundreds of thousands of players. But that's also the magic of it all, which is awesome.
That's why I was asking you, like, are you literally really doing 12 classes and 36 ascendancies, like actually?
Yeah, that's absolutely. We have we know what we want to do with
it's a
all
bit
that
unhinged.
Stuff. It is a bit, but we like a challenge. I mean, a studio that produces a passive skill tree like we do clearly has a bit of a glutton for punishment with regard to just like mixing.
You totally could have done 6 and then like, I don't know, added more later in an expansion or something.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we could have. I mean, look, this is the plan. This is the plan. I mean, like as people go through early access, it's going to feel like there's just expansion content coming up pretty frequently. Just because we have all the stuff that we kind of got a lot of the way through. So there's stuff to come. I mean, look, I'm pretty sure. Like I really want to get the Druid out. Like we announced it, we've talked about it. It's a lot of fun. I'm keen to get that out there as soon as we can. The Huntress we've talked a bunch about as well. There's like those kinds of things. I think we'll be able to move towards those pretty quick. There's obviously more to do.
The other thing you mentioned, talking roadmap like things, is we've always been. It's hard to predict because a lot of what will happen is, and what we leave space for is reacting to what the players want. And so if you plan everything for so long, you're going to have very, very, very slow reaction times to fixing, or adding certain content where maybe the issue is like, the campaign needs more of this, or this class needs more of this or something. So if you're planning, then you're going to be delivering on what they want solved like a year down the line or even longer.
Right,
and where we like to remain very, very dynamic and like, you want to be able to fix that stuff like, this is the main problem. Like, sure, obviously you need more than a week sometimes, most of the time. But we want it generally to be that the next releases, expansions, updates, whatever, can alleviate as many of those problems as possible. So, you try not to get too strict with the planning has generally been our philosophy because especially when it comes to actually having the live service product out, because that is very, very important. Otherwise, you're never going to seem like you're doing what people want. And what are you doing if not that?
So that actually is a good point. Like I was going to ask, what does the team want out of the beta? Because obviously it's like a good way to market the game, but it's also key to shaping the game in the future. Like the actual beta, it's not just early access.
I think one of the most important things, I think it's going to be really good for the development team to get back into a live mindset and like get it back into the idea of like everything we make is shipping.
People are seeing this.
Like get back into this. People are seeing. Like actually getting back into that and like being able to sort of see directly like, okay, we make something, it goes in the game, people like it, don't like it, like that kind of stuff. Like and that really like that has been our studio for like most of its lifetime. Obviously, before we released PoE1, it wasn't, but after that point, I mean, we are a company. We are a company that likes to think that we can do live service better than anyone else. Like that is our goal. And so, like getting back into that again, for everyone in the studio, so that everyone's working on things that are going to be releasing within, certainly in less time than 3 months away. is going to think be really, really good for us again. I look forward to just being able to do that because these long term, like really long term things, like that span over years. It's like you go so long without proper feedback, like stuff kind of gets made, and then like it's not really in a real game, and so it doesn't get
probably
tested
lose
properly.
perspective,
And you absolutely lose perspective on this stuff. So I think that that's just going to be a really great to get back to that again.
Yeah. I honestly, as you said, it is early access. It is a beta period, and I'd say, personally speaking, the thing that, and we mentioned it briefly about the character balance and the builds that are broken and all that, that's obviously pretty useful to me, right?
Yeah.
Plus, we have other systems in there, like, the checkpointing system, right? You have to kill the boss in one life. These are things we haven't mass tested, and obviously other games have, and they work, and that's awesome. There are other things like, the end game system is a little bit less forgiving in that if you die, you fail the map, right? These things are things that we obviously need to test and iterate on in the future by adjusting the difficulty and stuff like that. And especially as you get towards this point of, the end game, like, okay, Act 1 has been tested like crazy.
Yep.
Right? And you get less and less testing as it goes on because you get less people, they've just been around for less time. And so, it's going to be a huge amount of iteration and feedback and from the players and us just, reevaluating all the stuff. And the thing is, we're always dynamic about that stuff. Like, we'll just change things if it's wrong. We'll redesign it. We'll come up with a new way. Jonathan's a firm believer of if A doesn't work and B doesn't work, then we'll find C, we'll find option C, we'll find option D, and we'll keep changing things and we'll make it work. So, it's going to be a lot of that iteration on our design decisions, how forgiving, because, like, the game is pretty hard. It can be pretty hard. And so when you're on that fine line of, like, if things are difficult, it's not too easy to know if you've tilted one way or the other. So, finding what everyone agrees should be the common corrected difficulty is something that I will obviously be paying very, very, very close attention to.
It's a pretty hard thing to nail down when you are making the game. And so we've seen that a lot where you folks have been pretty willing to change and then rechange and rechange again some of the core features like Flasks and the waypointing system and portals, and you're keeping that kind of mindset going into the beta then.
Of course. I mean, look, we're always willing to change stuff. Like that Flask thing, like the most recent change to that was like ultra recent. Like have we even had like a closed beta of that yet? Was it? No. I think we haven't. Yeah, but I mean, I think it's way better than it was. Like it's the things have improved a lot. And honestly, like that's one of those things we've been wanting to do something to sort out Flasks for ages.
Yep.
And it really came about because when actually looking at what new players were having trouble with when they were playing, Flask piano was actually like, even from the very beginning of the game, actually ended up being one of those things that like people just had trouble, just like just the manual dexterity required to like hit all your different flask keys, and then you have to know when one of your flasks has run out so you can move to the next one, and like various things like that. Like all that stuff actually was like just a weirdly large amount of mechanical complexity right from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And then even at endgame, I don't think it was really that satisfying either, because you ended up with like, just like having to press all these buttons all the time, and obviously it's all utility flasks that people are using at endgame. And then we kind of tried to band-aid this in PoE 1 with the some of the flask automation stuff that was added there, but there was still this idea that that you're still more powerful if you don't automate. So therefore, it's like there's that trade-off there. So
you're just more powerful if you get mage blood. Really,
sure. I guess. Sure.
And then it's all automated, and you're very powerful.
Yeah, sure, all right. But so the point is effectively that the charm stuff that we're doing effectively means that you no longer, the game is making that decision of like, that stuff will be automated. You no longer have to do that like crazy flask piano to get the best, the best out of your character. And I think that is definitely a step in the right direction. And the other thing as well is it actually makes the crafting more meaningful, I think, on the flasks, because when you've got like 5 slots, then like the individual mods and the individual stuff like seems to tend to not matter as much. I mean, obviously, people want instant recovery and things like that, but like but like now it's like it's much more meaningful. Like on your life flask, the choice between do I want instant or do I want way more life, like that kind of stuff actually can be a lot more meaningful once you've only got one. So yeah, I think it is a lot better personally.
You have we'll jump ahead to Floss since we're on the topic. You have locked in effectively the fact that there's a mana flask there now, so that there's always going to be a mana flask slot. And how does that tie into your design for mana? And are we always going to be using a mana flask slot, or if we solve another way, what does it do?
You can absolutely solve another way, and then you'll just have a flask slot that isn't doing anything for sure. But I think it kind of has to work that way because we really don't want. Because like once you sort of start getting into changing that around, I feel like the system sort of starts to break with regard to like, you know, the feeling of like, I know where mana is, I know where my health is, like that kind of stuff. That being said, you know, we've always got uniques and stuff like that. I believe there's already...
Yeah, there is a unique that allows you to equip 2 life flasks.
But the thing is, then that's a build choice that you're making, so it's a little bit different, and that's fine. But I think the system as it works now, just, it's a lot easier.
So it does sound like on the mana side of things then that there are going to be multiple angles of solving mana, not
Of course.
necessarily flasks.
So we've got Leech edition number 475 is how it works. And we've finally got it right this time. You know, I think it works. So I think it's good. So I think that Leech will be more common.
I'm not going to have to like crack out the Leech diagram showing the different buckets and things like that.
I was saying, I think that Leech might be... No, I think... I was going to say, Leech is one of the topics in the studio that has wasted the most designer time of anything in the industry. But I actually don't think it's that. I think the actual worst offender is what stats should Dex give you. I think that is like that one has wasted there's so many arguments about that.
I feel like that one's never come to the fore. Like we know about the Leech one,
but no one is happy about it giving accuracy. But no one has a better idea than what accuracy that it can give. And then, like everyone's going to come up with like in chat a bit. I bet they'll be like saying, oh, you know, it can give this or this, whatever. But there's like yeah, seriously, there's been endless arguments about that topic. It's like, it's outrageous.
Yeah. You've got me thinking about it now.
Yeah.
I mean, speed would be good, but then it's probably too much.
Something like Dex, you just can't.
Dex stacking speed.
Oh, we can get all the designers down here right now.
Yeah, I know. We'll just have it out again. We'll just have it out again.
The longest Q&A of all time.
Yeah.
It's already going to be that.
Sometimes you're just you start the day and you're like, all right, here are the problems we need to solve. And then you're like,
what about?
But then accuracy on Dex comes up again.
No, it's 3 p.m. and we're still discussing dexterity.
Yeah.
So go home. Just make it accuracy again.
Exactly. That is literally how it comes back to accuracy every time.
This is okay.
Yeah.
Rewinding a little bit, we can't forget our roots with Path of Exile 1, of course. So for the PoE 1 enjoyers, what is the plan for PoE 1 during the course of this beta? Is there going to be leagues launching? Is it on the back burner?
Yeah, there absolutely will be leagues launching. Now, I don't know the exact date, but the plan is kind of late February.
Yep.
But I mean, look, we'll see what happens. I will admit that unfortunately we did have to steal a few PoE 1 resources just towards the end here, which is kind of been a bit unfortunate. I really wish we didn't have to. But as I said, we kind of underestimated some of the stuff. But everyone is going to be going back to PoE 1 again for the February league, and we're going to make sure that we can do that. Like one of the things that was a big problem for our studio when we had a long-term project and a short-term project, is that. You've always had that thing of like you always want to work on the short-term thing.
Yeah.
So now that we've got 2 short-term things coming up, I actually think it's going to be a bit easier to prioritize in some respects because,
funnily enough,
it's like it's just like all that stuff is then is like coming up soon. So, but we'll see how it goes. But we need to get that PoE 1 expansion out next.
Yeah, obviously, I just want to always make it clear that, the reason why things can't be so planned out is, again, we're just releasing this game.
Yep.
Obviously, we pivoted to endgame, and then that needed more resources. And then, of course, combined with the fact that, things obviously change. There are unpredictable things in the environment we can't necessarily guarantee. And then, of course, you have, Christmas coming up and all of that, right? There's so many variables to consider, but we also don't know how much time is going to be invested necessarily or need to be invested into live operations for post-release. How many problems are going to go wrong? How many builds how many of the uniques are broken? How many, and where do all these resources go? There are like just millions of variables here to consider, and so it can get very, very difficult, especially at this time. But once you release, you have a bit of a grace period, so to speak, where more like a period of extreme amounts of fire, where we're putting out fires everywhere. But we have a period where we're fixing everything. You get everything stable, and then we're going to be like, all right, let's recalibrate, figure everything out, and what is our plans, and then establish all of that, based also on the feedback we get from that period where everything's on fire. Not to make it sound like it's going to be bad, but that is the inevitability. Is that there's always problems.
Hopefully, it appears good from a player perspective, but there's always going to be like, oh my god, people found this, and we don't
have to see all the fires.
Yeah. Like ideally, the best thing is when we're able to fix some kind of exploit before people even hear about it.
Yeah.
And when I say exploit, I'm just talking about some broken thing. Like if we we obviously normally have to worry about like the whole mid-league nerf concept, but it's like if you can deal with something within like an hour or two of it happening, then it's like you're kind of okay because no one had a chance to kind of like everyone didn't swap their build over to it or whatever.
Yeah.
But we're gonna have to be really on the ball for PoE 2 just because there's so many things that are new.
Well, I mean, look, we have several bosses with several elevators. How many of them can be pushed up the elevator? You know what I mean? Well, that's what I mean. When I say a fire, I'm talking about bosses getting pushed up elevators. Like, that's not okay.
I am liking my mercenary flashbang knockback is very fun.
Right. Yeah, you need to look into that, by the way. The whole flashbang.
I feel like you're going to nerf my build.
Yeah.
Is this when he's
Stay away from my
finding fires
Grenada.
already?
Yeah.
No, these are the fun things. Discovering that stuff can be very fun for the players. It's just internally, it's like, oh no, what are we doing? It can get a little bit panicky after release, and it there's lots of things going on. You're like, oh geez, what do I solve first? But obviously, it's the same as PoE 1. We're good at it at this point.
Got some experience.
Yeah.
Indie belts. You aren't going to be torturing us with like releasing beta stuff at the same time as PoE 1 league launches.
Yeah, the plan is to keep them separated a bit from each other so that you get a chance to play.
Don't
with
make me
both teams.
choose.
Yeah.
So we saw a cinematic, to put it lightly. It was that was quite epic, and I know has been cooking for quite some time, and that was pretty exciting. But we've also seen just a lot of story stuff happening on a much higher level than previously now. So stepping up your storytelling game here a bit.
Yeah, so we're really wanting to make sure that the storytelling in PoE 2 is much better than what it was in PoE 1. There's a lot more kind of, that kind of like stuff with the introductions to boss fights and the outros and things like that, like all that stuff. We've just got a lot more storytelling going in. All of those things. We do have the intro cutscene. There's also kind of like light, like between the acts. There's these kind of like more kind of motion graphic type cutscenes, just kind of establish things. And there might be some more surprises later on in the game as well. Not in early access, unfortunately. Later on that we can see as well. But ultimately, we just want to make sure that I think a lot of people who got through the PoE 1 story had no idea what was happening by the end. And so effectively we want to make sure that is not the case this time around, that people really are able to absorb things. But
Guilty.
One thing I will say, though, is that it's ultra important to us that we don't break the feeling that, like, when you're playing a second time, that it feels like we don't want it to feel annoying the second time.
Yeah, we were talking about this morning. About you don't take the control out of the player's
exactly.
hands.
So yeah, I'm personally a believer of the fact that if you just when you change the camera position for a cutscene, immediately it feels way more annoying, like, because there's this whole thing of like if you click on an NPC and like the camera changes position, like, sure, when you're playing through the campaign the first time, that kind of thing is like, that can be cool, but then if you're like you're playing through the second, third, fourth, fifth time, you want to be able to go to the NPC and go click, 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 and just get past, and without it feeling like you've had to sort of worry about anything. So like effectively, we want to make sure that it's still that we still have that, because ultimately, we're a game you expect people to play through many times. So ideally, we can kind of deliver both the situation where the first time you play through it, it feels like an amazing story that you're getting, that you're taking seriously, that you're understanding, that there's like all those sort of touch points and little things just all through, while also maintaining the fact that if you know what you're doing, it's like you don't have to go talk to some quest giver just to get a quest. Like, you can just go do the thing, without having to talk to someone about it first. That kind of stuff is really important, just to make that stuff work well when you know what you're doing.
Yeah, you said something this morning that stuck with me, where you said like Path of Exile is a game where the player's meta knowledge is allowed and
yes,
encouraged.
Absolutely.
So you're allowed to cheat the quests.
Effectively, there's what the character knows and there's what the player knows, and in our game, what the player knows needs to be sufficient as far as like being able to progress the storyline. If you don't want to have it so you just talk to an NPC just to find out something you already knew as a player.
If you kill this boss, you get the next area's waypoint, so you just like kill it, log out, log in, waypoint, right?
I love doing that.
Meta knowledge.
Sure. Yeah. So you explained to me the other day the kind of the context for the beast and how that leads into the cutscene in the beginning of PoE 2 from PoE 1, and that I think helped put it in a lot more perspective for me and made me appreciate and understand what's going on with the story.
So effectively, what you're seeing in the opening cutscene is effectively the a new seed of a beast that is going to be is growing. Now in PoE 1, the beast was killed. And then what happened in response to that is a bunch of all the gods in the world were able to were able to effectively rise again. And you killed a bunch of them, but there are more, in the world. And effectively, we don't want to spoil too much about the storyline overall, but effectively, obviously someone here, the Count is wanting to harness the power of the beast once again. And then we have the mysterious figure there who is saying, no, don't do this. This always turns out badly.
There was a comment in chat that I loved that was like, stop opening Eldritch boxes.
Yeah, exactly.
Why do people keep doing this?
Yeah.
But I would.
If someone handed you a mysterious orb, wouldn't you press the button?
I mean,
There's a puzzle box.
Exactly.
I want to open it. What's inside?
Exactly. Yeah.
yes. I mean, I'm going to try, but who knows how many hours it's going to take me.
Indeed.
So we had a fun moment earlier where you were watching it and you were like, "Oh, we really need to rename that passive because he's a Karui and it's a wolf. It's called a wolf.
Great Wolf's Howl. And the Great Wolf obviously being
so he went out there.
Ismite history.
You started telling him.
I stomped out of the room and I was like, "We need to rename that notable. He's Karui." And then I was kindly reminded that actually he was
an orphan who
orphan and was adopted by a Ismite and raised and so yes, there is a mixture of Karui and Ismite background, and I was like,
it works. You were wrong.
Fair enough. I walked back in here all sad and whatever. My bad. It's fine. The name
he
is
looked
good.
so chastised when he came back in, but that just points to the fact that I feel like you're doing a lot more with the characters here. For sure. You even mentioned that ascendancy stuff is going to have an impact story-wise.
So, with
that's wild.
We just think a lot about this kind of stuff. So the acolyte of, and I always get this name wrong. The acolyte of is it Chalula? Chayula. I always say this wrong. The acolyte of Chayula, for example. So that we have this sort of storyline with the origins of the monks, where there's like an order of monks who worship a thing they call the Dreamer, and the Dreamer is actually Chayula. So they don't know this. So they're effectively worshipping a breach demon. So the acolyte of Chayula is effectively you embracing the fact that I'm worshipping a breach demon. I'm just going to go all the way.
I'm in too deep now.
Yeah, exactly. we're just gonna do it. So there's a lot of thinking like that goes into these things. Like what is the history of these people? Because I think a lot of that stuff inspires interesting mechanics as well. So for example, on that one, you've got that into the breach skill, which kind of means you're always in a breach all the time. You can see the things going on. Like that stuff is. I think that there's a lot of cool inspiration there. So coming up with that storyline stuff for that stuff,
there's a couple other little things that I think is cool as well, and hopefully people will notice and pay attention to. So there's one of the bosses that was shown as uses a lot of time or chronomancy, and interestingly, if you are a sorceress and you ascend to chronomancer and you then go to fight that boss, if you, for example, try to use time freeze, the boss is like, that doesn't work on me. And has a dialogue line. And if you cast temporal chains on them, he's like, just puts it back on you. And it's like, And so there's interesting things like that. And it doesn't change things on a grand scale, right? It doesn't make a certain class not viable or anything like that. But there's just interesting little quirks and quips everywhere. Different bosses have different intro lines depending on what class you're playing. They have different skill lines sometimes depending on what class you're playing.
Yeah, we've got different dialogue all through the campaign for different classes. Like the sorceress is obviously from the Maraketh. When she goes back to the Maraketh, there's kind of a little backstory there about how she was banished originally. So she needs to find a way to she needs to be accepted back into their culture again. We've got things like the character we talked about earlier. So the warrior was an orphan. He was brought up by actually one of the NPCs in Act 1 town. So obviously there's a whole different dialogue there because he's effectively his adopted son. We've got things like that. There's a lot of thought that's gone into just trying to make it feel like all these character classes have some level of involvement with the world. They didn't just come into existence the moment that you.
There's other little things. So more on the narrative side, obviously we saw the world map. You have the icons that show different things that are in each act, like all the things you want to explore, find, and awesome. But each of them also has a little bit of a kind of little bit of text on them as well. And for example, there's one in one of the first areas in the game that's just like a camp of Iron Count guards. And, we showed it in a trailer when the Ranger class trailer we did, whenever it was, you saw the ranger kill some of them because they were trying to like hurt a child, and the child was just trying to get some food. And the ranger just like snipes them with arrows and kills them ruthlessly. And so you read this thing and you're like, you hear whispers of an Iron Count, scouting party that was slain by a rogue archer or something like that. So you get these little things where we're like connecting a lot of little dots, and even that you absorb a little bit of interesting little information. You've got other things, for example, when you enter an area, it not only says the name at the top now, it has almost a subtitle text that's giving you a little bit of history. And these little things like somehow make the world building feels so much better. And when you approach certain landmark rooms and you walk into them, you'll get a banner at the top as well, which says what it is and gives again a little bit of a thing. And all these little micro narrative delivery mechanisms like make you feel way more immersed in the world and way more aware of what's going on and way more connected to your character, way more connected to the bosses, to the NPCs. There's a lot we're doing now that we certainly never did before. We didn't even think of before. But yeah, it's
I like that
awesome.
a lot because, like, as an action RPG gamer, I don't really care too much about plot, but I do want a really cool world to be blowing monsters up in. Basically, that's all I want the characters to be cool, I want the baddies to be cool, and I want, like, the things happening around me that, like, build out a bit of that story without me having to stop killing stuff.
Yeah.
And it sounds like there's more of that going on as well, which is great.
There's tons.
The baddies being cool. I mean, that's how we almost designed an ascendancy class in here just before when we were watching that trailer earlier.
Yes. So what you were saying a shadow. You came up with a shadow ascendancy.
Yeah. Internally we had some developers watching the trailer yesterday, getting excited about it, and then I was like, I want to play that. I want to play that character. I want to be that character. Yeah. That's awesome. That like. Kind of Vaal Thaumaturge type character, and so like
cool.
All of a sudden it's like we should make that a class, and then we had another guy like suggest it should be a shadow, and so now I'm like, oh yeah, we're definitely we have to do a Vaal Thaumaturge like shadow ascendancy, like that's gonna be cool. And you can do awesome things now. Even I know it's hard to see because you hide it under all the armor, but you can do things like. With our character classes, just due to the upgrades and models, where all of a sudden now the character can have tattoos added to them and stuff like that is completely feasible in the future. And like, I want to do a lot more of that stuff. Like for the, there's little things like for the Warbringer, I think was the class name on the warrior. When you take that ancestral totem node, all your totems now have like an extra blue glow to them, kind of like they're enhanced by this ancestral magic. And what we also want to do is add tattoos as well that like glow blue when you're using certain skills and all that. So heaps of little things that again connect all the culture and all that stuff together and make you feel like it's believable as opposed and this is a character as opposed to this is just a mechanic and
makes picking an ascendancy more epic. I know that there was a part in the trailer that was like not fully finished where you ascend and it doesn't really do anything, but I know you want it to be like a cool moment where some power goes into
absolutely.
you.
We just hadn't finished the VFX yet.
Even the another one, the Blood Mage, when you like play the Blood Mage, now you get an additive surge on your character whenever you cast spells. You're getting like almost bloodbending kind of vibe going on, and like
drawing it from their veins and sending out a fireball.
It's cool.
Yeah.
It's real cool.
Yeah, you can have like the tattoos get tattooed on them as they ascend and things like that. I mean, that just makes taking ascendancy way more cool, which is already, I think, I almost feel like ascendancy is more important than the classes for players kind of like feeling the vibe of what they want to do with their character. Like.
For sure, because the classes are pretty open. You can play whatever skills, whatever weapon. Sure, you're on a passive tree at a start point, but by high level, you kind of go wherever you want to go. Using jewels, especially getting off-class stuff, you can kind of be whatever you want with the base class.
Yeah.
So eventually, the ascendancy is what becomes more of that important identifying feature because that's what you have actually chosen that makes you distinct. That another different class wouldn't be able to actually have. So yeah.
So you want to make that super super cool. And on that note, I know I was definitely confused. I know people were definitely confused and a little worried about ascendancy and what's happening with that. And people were like watching the Sekima trial and being like, oh, what if I don't like this? Oh, is this another lab again? But I want you to like lay it out as like simply as possible. Like how do you ascend?
Yeah, so effectively in the full game there's going to be 3 ascendancy trials. For early access there's 2, and effectively you can use any of those ascendancy trials to be able to do your ascension.
You choose.
You choose which one, And effectively, if you as you get to higher level keys for those trials, that will unlock more points. Like if you do it at certain level breakpoints, that will allow you to get more points for those classes. So if you want to just play the entire, just only the Trial of the Chaos God with to get all your points, then you can just decide to do that. Just play it at higher and higher levels, and you get more points as you go through. If you want to do a mix, that's fine too. Personally, I think people will want to try out all the different content. I mean, you might think that you, but even within the trials, there's choices, right? Like, I know that there's always contention around traps, but because in the because in the Trial of the Sekimas, you can choose which rooms you want to go to. If you don't want to deal with traps, you just don't pick those rooms, right? Like,
you don't go to the gauntlet rooms.
Don't go to the gauntlet rooms. You can just go to other things.
Do the combat ones.
Do the combat ones, and that's fine too. So effectively, it's like you always get to choose like what you're doing there. It's funny because like I know traps are so contentious, but also there are other people who just enjoy that stuff. So you want to have something for all those people too.
There's these
Path of Exile, divisive content, but lots of choice, and you can choose what to do and what not to do, and then we're embracing that here now, and that is. I mean,
you're clearly leaning into that now. You have, such a competitive advantage in that you have so much content, and even with PoE2, that's still going to be the case. So you can lean into that, like making content that is spicier but divisive,
for sure.
And now you're like separating trees and having these things be a little able to be focused on a lot more. And you're doing that with the trial, with the ascendancies. So and you can kind of do all of them and drip feed yourself smaller progression if you want.
And there's also stuff that you're going to be getting from those, like specific rewards and everything that might incentivize you to do that. But of course, on the other hand, if you don't want to do that content, we have full open trade, right? You can just trade for the rewards, and that's fine too. So that's always part of the.
Yes, like the rewards there, for example, like jewels drop throughout the world. But if you want to get more jewels, you go and run Sanctum. Now, if you want to get the radius jewels, it's Sanctum. I can't. Trial of the Sekima.
So just for anyone who isn't a Path of Exile 1 player, this is effectively a sequel to Sanctum League that we did in Path of Exile 1. So it's mechanically very similar, but it's obviously a Maraketh, like a Maraketh trial now, and we've changed it. A lot of things about it have changed, and like the content is new, but it is effectively the same overall mechanic. In terms of that sort of roguelike mechanic that we have.
And it's the same with the other one. You have Ultimatum and PoE 1 being the theme, and of course now it's redesigned and it's evolved into Trial of Chaos. A lot of people in chat would have been spamming Ultimatum, and for those who haven't played would probably be like, what? I don't understand.
Effectively the Trial of the Chaos of Chaos is a sequel to Ultimatum. Which is
and we just have to get used to the new names, which is very hard. Anyway, the point being, like, of course, and Vaal Orbs drop in the world as well, and if you want a larger dose of Vaal Orbs and, you don't want to trade, feel free to run some ultimatums. Thing is, because they're all item-generated keys as well, it's not like you have to do it right then and there. You can trade the keys away. At any point, you can also buy more keys if you want to farm more of that thing. And if you just want to do it later, just stockpile a bunch of them, run them all at your leisure, you know what I mean? It's like... You have the freedom. They are itemized, tradable, as a lot in Path of Exile tradition. But
as is everything, right? We do the only thing you can't trade is gold. So we're like the exact opposite of most games, where it's like the gold is freely tradable and the items get locked. We're like the gold is the only thing you can't trade, and every other item is free and open.
And that's because you've made gold be this like way to be like you're playing the game, so you have access to this, and
absolutely,
so you don't want to trade that away.
Effectively,
So, how on the ascendancies and the trials, how hard do you foresee getting your ascendancy to be while leveling? Do you expect people to fail out and attempt these things multiple times, and what does that look like if you do?
Well, I failed the first time I did this. Did the trial.
It is important to know that first itemized key is a quest key, and we have special rules around it that if you do fail, you can just repeat it, right?
Yeah, you changed that recently because that was something that I didn't actually realize you'd changed. I guess it was a little bit too harsh to require to get another one.
Yeah, you weren't the only one failing it.
Yeah.
So pretty much you get to reattempt it, and for something like Ultimatum, just to immediately start thinking of exploits, it's like, I can just do 3 of the waves, then intentionally fail, and then repeat them. Well, we've thought of that. Don't worry, you can't. But the first ones are repeatable. You're not going to be like, what the heck? Now I have to just play to the whims of random generation to ascend like that.
Right.
Yeah, so
it is pretty hard though. Like it'll take. I definitely don't think you'll do it on your first attempt. But
I did. I did pass on. I was clenched though.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, especially in that boss fight.
I was watching him do the boss fight.
You came by right as I was doing the boss fight.
But you had some kind of powerful boons there, to be perfectly honest. So.
I got 60% move speed. But
Yeah,
that
you
was
were
part of
like-
my strategic choice.
I was watching you from. I'm like, how is he so fast?
This isn't the PoE2 slide.
I was like, what was dodge rolls going across half the arena?
This game's supposed to be slow.
No.
Yeah, it was good. It was good fun. I quite liked it. I like mostly like Sanctum. I don't want to do it all the time, but I did quite like the Trial of Sycamore. But knowing that there's other choices, so I can do Ultimatum instead or something like that is fun.
100%.
So you got these like 2 roguelike dungeons that are going into the beta that launch, but they're done very differently. One's got the honor system, which is like a separate health, but it's based on and scaled by your health, which I noted as quite
And your defenses
interesting.
now. It can be
And your
fully
defenses.
mitigated and
yeah,
everything.
so fully scaled by your character. You go in a tanky character, you'll be tanky in the dungeon, which is really cool. So
And then with
you've solved
Ultimatum,
that.
and just because people will ask, in Ultimatum there aren't any traps.
Yes.
So that's the
no
thing
traps
that
in Ultimatum
yeah.
and no honor system in Ultimatum. If
Correct.
you just want more of a pure
Yeah,
combat
correct. You can do
experience,
Ultimatum,
then that's your choice. And then there's going to be a third one as well, which
They will eventually.
is a secret for now.
So
but-
once Act 4 goes in, then we'll have a third trial. So people sort of broadly know that the Karui in Act 4. So it's a question of how would the Karui ascend is the question there.
Yes, and if there's any other things that have been called trials associated with the crew at some point in the past, and how likely that is to be related.
I'm just thinking now, we're just thinking of that Vaal Thaumaturge class before, and I'm already thinking like, oh, it'd be so cool if you ascend an Ultimatum. We want the Trial Master to say different lines to you because you're like choosing the way of the Vaal. I can't stop thinking about all this stuff.
I did hear a few of his lines in some of the gameplay Jonathan was showing me. It was quite good. I love that he's back, the Trial Master.
Yeah, he's
He's
cool.
good. A little salty sometimes that you're taking this power, it seems. So we have the unique rewards from each of them. We got like the like you said, the jewels are global, but there are unique jewels, and then there are unique socketables from the other one.
Yep.
And is there something planned to be unique from the final third trial that will be added later?
Of course.
Yes, there is already.
Secret.
I know what I'm not going to say. Don't worry.
Okay, keep some secrets. Fine then.
Yeah. Again, I value the discovery, right? I'm certainly if I accidentally say it, it is certainly by mistake. But yes, don't forget.
And that Vaal Orbs from the Ultimatum in particular they seem like they're a lot more important, a lot more powerful.
I mean, I certainly think that like some of the stuff is a lot better with how they work. So So one of the things that we wanted to change was that implicits on items are truly implicit. Like you can't get rid of them; they stay there. And so that means that when you do a Vaal Orb, the mod that you get there now is an addition to whatever implicit already had, which is obviously good. And then the next one being that you can get plus one socket above the normal limit, which is also kind of powerful. So especially with the soul cores, so that in the Trial of Chaos, you get soul cores that you can't get from anywhere else, and those effectively are mods that are typically a bit beyond what you would normally get like on regular items. Whereas runes, which kind of drop everywhere, those ones are just kind of normal everyday mods that you would expect to find on any
Resists
kind of item.
and things
Yeah,
like
just
that.
resists and damage and that kind of stuff. So effectively, the soul cores is is kind of the more end gamey socketables that you might want to be using. And obviously being able to get plus one socket. I mean, it's something that everyone will want. But on the other hand, there is that risk of just bricking your item. So that's the deadly gamble you have as your final crafting step there.
It's Vaal Orbs are more forgiving though.
They are, yeah.
But if you think about we talked about enchantment, yeah. So some slots you might value the enchantment over a rune or a socket slot, right? That probably, especially towards endgame, I'd say that's probably going to tilt that way because maybe a soul core contests with it, but the whole point is that there's choice there involved.
Yeah.
And then there's enchantment. We just talked about the socket. There's obviously always the case of doing nothing, which happens. But for just say regular rare items, it will re-roll like 1 to 3 modifiers at random. Effectively, do a chaos orb on 1 to 3 modifiers, not all 6. And as much as that can often be a downside, because if you're using it on a very good item, obviously it's going to take away the good ones.
Interesting.
But if you're using it on a mid item, you can actually turn it very good. And I've had this happen. Like when I've been playing, I've got this is life, defense, double res, and something else that I don't want. And I'm like, I'll just start Vaaling everything because why not? I've got my Vaal Orbs and I Vaal it and it re-rolls that bottom mod into a tri-res. And now I got a tri-res double defense life helmet. And I was like, yo, awesome. So even that, which can often be perceived as a bad outcome, now isn't going to completely brick your item. And so, for example, if you have a weapon, you got your 3 damage mods, and you got some bad suffixes, it could even be an option, or hopefully it doesn't just remove all 3 damage mods, whereas before it's like if it bricked it often was almost always a brick, right? Like that item is now dead. So,
and then you told me about a new unique result, which I don't know if you want to spoil or not.
100%.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's so cool.
I'm surprised you even got that one past Rishi, honestly.
I mean, he got it made.
Okay, great.
We discussed it. I agree. I agree. I messaged it to him thinking he'll be like, no way, this is unacceptable. But
Just
no,
tell,
he
was all for it.
It didn't turn into a dexterity chat.
Yeah.
And so, what it effectively does is it just takes the mod values and it goes up to, I can't remember exactly the values, but let's just say it changes all the values to between 0.8 and 1.2 of what they were, multiplied, but it doesn't care about the minimum and maximums. So, for example, if you had 1,000 life counts heart, you can use this to get, again, this is me assuming it's 20% variance, but because I can't remember what we balanced it to, but you'll be able to get a 1,200 life counts heart, for example. Now that's obviously giving up the enchantment and a socket. Just thinking about sockets on Calm's heart. I can't remember what we did, but whatever. I think you can actually do that, which is interesting. Ooh. But ultimately, it's like, now I'm choosing, do I want the enchantment? Do I want an extra, 100 something, 200 life, whatever that ends up being, or do I want the socket? So it's quite an interesting choice and adds an extra axis of corruption to unique items. That is, I think,
corrupted divining of uniques. Interesting.
Yeah, effectively, it's divining them, but with higher maximums and lower minimums.
Surely there's going to be some broken things like max res or something like that.
We'll find out.
Cross that bridge when it comes to it. Yeah,
it's fine.
So that was all just talking about the trials, how you actually get your ascendancies. But what about the actual ascendancies themselves? How are they cooking?
Well, they're fun. They're cool.
Yeah.
We certainly tried to get what we've tried to do is for the classes we've tried to have one that's a bit more out there.
Yeah.
Something that isn't just like if you think even about in PoE 1, you've got the duelist, and you can go like champion or slayer or holy words I don't remember, but you know the drill. And the gladiator. And the problem is like, okay, they're all just about like hitting stuff with weapons, and they haven't. There's nothing really out there. They all sound cool. Like, don't get me wrong, and they can be cool, and they do have differences, but there's nothing that's like kind of crazy. So all of a sudden now, when you're like, sorceress, you're using all your elemental skills, and now you can just like go into this thing that can stop time. It's a little bit more crazy, and you've got the mercenary, and you can turn into a gemling legionnaire and effectively fuse gems into your flesh to like, mutate yourself. It's like not just talking about crossbows and projectiles over and over and over and over again. It's like doing kind of whack stuff. So I really like that. That's awesome, and we're going to make sure every single class has one thing that is like definitely out there, and then one thing that's more predictable, more to the expectation of the trope. For example, the Deadeye to the Ranger, and but yeah, lots and lots of cool interactions, just cool playing with different mechanics, and we've tried to make them like, for example, none of them call out a weapon, right? None of them. So we're trying to make sure that they're broad enough to be that. You might be a ranger going a Deadeye, but playing a caster, right?
Yeah.
Playing spells, like keeping all of that open, that flexibility, that kind of crazy, for the Johnny players, as we call it out there, who want to just completely experiment and figure out, the most broken, weird stuff, and you get things with that when you're still like, okay, I'm a ranger. And I'm using a Quill Rain in one weapon set, spec'd into a bunch of prod speed, attack speed, and in my second weapon set I'm using a Spellcaster Staff with a bunch of projectile stuff, and I've invested into more spell damage side, and you've got a whack tree, and all of a sudden now you're this like Deadeye, Archer, Spellcaster, Mage hybrid doing all kinds of wacky stuff, or like even, or let's say the same build and experimenting with a bunch of triggers, and so you're using your bow as a Quill Rain as a high attack speed delivery mechanism for, laying down a bunch of either CCs or slows, or building up crowd controls, and then you're using the caster stuff, and like you get some pretty out there things going on, and the important thing is it's not like just like benefiting only arrows or only bow attacks or anything like that. It's broad and now, you know, opens up the world to what you can do. And same, like the Gemling Legionnaire on the Mercenary is entirely just about gem slots, skills, support, etc. There's no, you don't have to be anything. You can be literally whatever build you want. And yeah, so that's embracing that and making sure that people still, even though we have all these classes, we're embracing that Path of Exile. You can do anything fantasy that we want people to be able to do. And if you don't want to go with the trope, perfectly fine. Yeah, and you'll still be powerful.
It sounds like you're really trying to avoid that thing that we've had a couple times in PoE 1 where like a certain niche is relegated to one ascendancy. Like that's the only way to go for it.
Sure.
But it sounds like that's not going to be the case here.
Well, at least if we're doing our job right, that should be the case. Yeah.
And with so many of the ascendancies as well. Got a lot of choices. Originally, the plan was to like have all of the PoE 1 ascendancies available, and it was some sort of weird split campaign stuff and all that. I don't really know at this point. It's a bit confusing. You mentioned Deadeye, though, so it sounds like some of them are coming forwards, but is it all just being redone? I think it's more redone at this point?
At this point, At this point, they'll just be different, right? Like originally, way back when, we were planning on just keeping the ascendancies as they were and putting them over. But at this point, that wouldn't even be good enough because like it doesn't fit the kind of like Path of Exile 2 way of designing this thing. So I mean, look, we might have a class called the Deadeye, and it might have the same themes, but it'll be like different actual mechanics and different things.
Yeah. I mean, even the Deadeye, you got Tailwind, works differently. You've still got an additional projectile. You know, like there are things that certainly carry over, but it's really easy, and it's honestly been fun just looking at them going like, you know, now we have all these system changes, all these skills, and everything works like this. Just what would the perfect class be? Not like how can we retrofit and band-aid a PoE 1 class to work. It's just way better to look at it and go, here's all the things we want. So, like when you only have now the life and mana flask and stuff, it could obviously things don't work quite the same. But then now you have the charm system, and all of a sudden, if you
actually
did
do wonder
that,
if Pathfinder would be cool with that.
Exactly,
like stacking charms.
So it's just here are 12, eventually 36 classes. It's not really like here's the PoE 1 counterpart and they're identical kind of thing anymore, for sure. Too many things changed for that to even be possible anyway.
Yeah. All right. That sounds very epic. We can skip over the flasks and trinkets as we did cover that very well. So moving into skills, I realized I had many pages of questions here, and then I was like, wait, we haven't even talked about skills here. so much for us to discover over the course of this beta. How has the list of skills been shaping up overall?
I mean, it's certainly getting there. I mean, look, there are even certain skills that won't even make it, even just within the classes we have. Like, there are still going to be some more skills coming later on as well for these classes, because there are more skills that we got just about there, and we just didn't quite make it. And like getting a class finished in terms of the skills you need, like it sort of seems very easy when you come up with, okay, we need 22, 23, 24, number of skills, something like that. And it seems like that's not so many, and you kind of design them. But when you actually come up with all of the things, the way they interact together, the number of prototypes you have to do that kind of don't really work, and you end up not being fun. And then, of course, the support gem stuff, like you need to make sure that every skill has enough viable supports so that you can actually even recommend to people to be able to do. Then you need things like the passive tree support for all of them. You need to have all of the stuff with the buff gems for each character class as well. You need to be thinking about uniques for the type of that can work with these things. It's just like there's so many different elements to actually make skills work, and once again, it's another area I think that was underestimated to some degree before, and it does take to actually get that finished, it takes a lot. That's been a total struggle, and we didn't think we would have to have only 6 character classes initially at the start of early access. We were thinking we would have 8 to begin with. But when it actually came down to actually getting to actually finish something, it just ended up being too much. Now obviously we've got a bunch of work on more of the classes that we've done. There's things there, but it's that finishing work of making sure that all the systems in the game come together to support, how that works.
Well,
that requires a lot.
Doing all of that as we're still discovering how we want those systems to work. Like the changes to support gems and all that. As we're also making support gems, as we're making character classes, just can cause things to slow down quite a bit, and then we have to recalibrate and all. It extreme amount of work that we certainly predicted poorly. But that was also because we are making all these cool systems to all these changes to all these systems, which are having like immense benefits as well. So,
For sure.
yeah, I would say it's pretty safe to expect that, you know, as much as you can't play them on day 0, some of those other classes that we have shown in the past, and some of the skills and stuff, there's a lot there, like just not to make it seem like it's shallow or anything, but we will be adding those classes in for sure.
Yeah, the thing that keeps like surprising me is, well, when you click that old gems tab when you're doing an uncut, there's quite a lot of skills in there, but you initially kind of box yourself away where you think, okay, so I'm playing the mercenary, so I'm just looking at the crossbow skills. And then I was like, well, what if I go look at the elemental skills? And then I find Flame Wall, and I'm like, oh, I can shoot my projectiles through that. Okay, cool. I like that, but that's like surface level, because you also have the weapon swap thing, and that you can actually viably do with the automated weapon swapping. It's not like Toxic where you have to push the button a bunch of times, and you've got the trees that like customize whenever you do it automatically on the fly. So that's like all of a sudden I'm like, oh, well, why can't I use a sword on the other hand?
You absolutely
That's
can
actually
do
a very
stuff.
cool mercenary vibe, sword and crossbow.
So yeah, I mean that stuff is like is crazy. I mean, like in the you know, actually there was one in the community guys recorded where they were using a bell, the bell skill with the quarterstaff with the rapid shot mercenary skill. And when I saw it, I was like, oh man, you know, that's like that's like a whole other thing. Yeah, like that I didn't even know about that particular combo until I saw it in the some of the footage they recorded.
I started thinking about that too with like multiplayer. And I was like, so I was throwing my gas grenades. Which you can blow up with your explosive grenades, but then I was throwing it at a boss that was doing burning ground, and they were blowing up instantly. I'm like, oh wait, so it reacts to the environment. Well, it's obviously going to react to my friends doing burning ground then. So my flame wall friend.
And this is the reason, like this conversation here is the reason why there's going to be crazy builds that we don't anticipate, because like the some of the stuff that can happen between classes, I just have no doubt we will not have discovered.
Yeah, like how much co-op have you really been able to test?
I mean, we do test party play all the time. Like, and Mark's like,
but to find all those,
I'm the support character player. Now I'm like freezing, armor breaking, putting down clouds, slow. You know, I'm like, holy, there's just a lot going on all of a sudden. I'm not just standing there like I got buffs coming out of me. You know, it's like you know, you're like. I'm actually doing all this active support and like different conditions to synergize with the group, and how it's like, oh, okay, you're doing that skill. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just do this and enhance my armor breaking and go ballistic armor breaking, and you just spam your thing that consumes it. You know, so you get a lot of that stuff going on for sure. Where, but you know, it's kind of honestly the terrifying part as well, where it's like. You know, what do we have? We had the whole like vulnerability curse with gas cloud ticks or something, and it was like literally applying armor break like every frame, and so you have the monsters going tink tink tink.
And then
tink,
you
tink,
have
tink,
armor explosion on there as well.
Yeah, and then you have some other thing, and you have some other guy consuming it, and again, oh my god, Quill Rain! Just don't even how many bloody synergistic things with Quill Rain.
Just, you can do a lot with that.
All the lightning arrows on the ground, and because they can, you know, lightning things hit them and explode, and all of a sudden now everyone's running around with Quill Rain, spamming lightning rods everywhere, and.
Yeah,
and Frostwall. Somehow Frostwall had about 15 abuse cases, and
I mean that's historically accurate.
Yeah, true.
Kinetic blast, Frostwalls, and all that. It returns. Sounds like it's coming back.
It'll be fun.
Yeah.
It's cool. Even finding all the stuff so far has been really fun. But yeah, I generally play multiplayer. Most of the alpha I've done is being in multiplayer. Cool. Play with other people. It's good to get a lot of that testing in there as well, because not a lot of others do it.
That's really good.
And then try and see what we can break, just for good fun. Honestly, the thing that's like hard is to then like, because you get this thing which is quite interesting where you have a staff is both a player and a developer, and I'm of the like, don't you better not keep that you know, something that's I wouldn't say exploit, but you know, something that's OP, a secret, right? You better bloody tell me, because
it's the exact reaction you had earlier.
You were saying people weren't telling you about their good
like
builds.
You get a situation someone doesn't want to tell you about their build, that's because they're like, oh, Mark will nerf it then. You know,
like you're supposed to be making game, not hiding your good builds.
I legitimately had a Monday meeting, and you know, whatever. I was like, I swear, if I see any of you at the top of the ladder on day one, we're going to have a talk.
Yeah, exactly.
I know you've hidden something from me.
Exactly.
No, I did tell you about my flashbangs and how good.
But maybe it's fine. I just wanted them to check.
Well, that's the thing. No, that is the thing that is hard. No one knows if their thing is actually look, there's a line that gets crossed, yes.
Yeah.
But sometimes you don't know. Is it just I've found something cool and it's powerful, or have I found something cool and it's broken? You know, and those things, I mean, we have to make those decisions, of course, and a lot of the time what is reported is just fine. And it's like, yeah, you got a good weapon, and you got this combo. You're strong.
If it's supported by items, then it's like fine to be very powerful. But if you're just like, I just pick these skills, and no matter what weapons I'm wearing, I'm just like completely ridiculous, then that's a different situation. Because now it's just a thing that anyone can do at a moment's notice, rather than actually requiring like, you know, oh, I have to find this combo of items and things like that. So that's a much different story.
But no, we've had a lot of good testing, a lot of good feedback, a lot of good people reporting that stuff, especially in the last like month. It's like coming in a lot because as the systems and everything's kind of stabilizing, you start to get a lot more of that, and people are understanding what the difficulties meant to be and what the power of characters is meant to be. As all of that came and started to stabilize, we got a lot more of this coming in, and we are kind of getting more understanding. But again, you'll never find them all. But you know, it's fun, good fun journey.
Support gems have changed a lot. How have you found the changes to them being now having no levels and the restriction of having only one support gem on your character of a type, but having a lot more of them?
I really like how this works. Like, I think that it adds so much more build diversity and interest to have to be making the decision of like, you know, where is this going to go? And the thing that's been important though with that system is it requires a lot more support gems to exist because you only have one on your character. You need tons of them, and like you need a lot of different ways to increase damage and a lot of ways to support different mechanics. It's like if you're going to have something like freeze, like, you know, if you're going to have a freezing skill, you need to be able to support that and augment that in like many different ways. And there needs to be more options than what you can even like. There needs to be, in order to have choice, you can't just have here's your 5 freeze things and that's all you do, right? There has to be more than that in order to be able to have it so you actually have some choices as well. So that kind of stuff has meant that you just need a lot of things going on there. But I think that the choices that you end up with as a player of like, you know, where do I put my model projectiles? Where do I put my PS? Where do I put, like, I think that leads to a lot more interesting decisions with how you build. And you know, like, I think that to me is where a lot of why it just works so much better. And we were certainly hesitant about the whole, you know, you can only have one support per character thing, because it sounds bad if you just hear about it as a player without actually playing it. Like your first reaction is you just hear that and you're like, oh, it's just a restriction. And it is arbitrary in some sense, right? There's no like, we can't justify it thematically, really. It just is what it is. And so that, I really don't like that kind of thing usually, because I want the theme to match the mechanic as much as possible. But in this case, it just made the gameplay so much better that like it just had to happen. So it was
arguably, if you need to, like, if you end up in a situation where you like, I have to put the support on every slot.
Exactly, that is less choice, and that's the reason why the gameplay is
less
bad.
choice, less interest, and also you may as well just bake that now into the skills and or
100%. And so this is the thing. It is actually much worse to have that, because it results in this outcome. But like, that's a kind of more subtle argument that like you have to kind of make to people if you want to kind of convince them that this is actually the right way. Because when you tell people, oh, there's this restriction, it doesn't sound like what they're getting out of that is more choice. It sounds like they're getting less. But the reality is it is actually more choice, because you no longer have like mandatory, like here's the 5 mandatory things you have to put on the skill. It's like there's actually much more going on.
I think it's much better helped realize my experience on the Mercenary that your vision of having like all of these skills available to you and them actually being worth using.
For sure.
Because if you had all the same support gems, I feel like you just pick the one that does the most damage and you make it do the most damage, and that's the only skill you use.
Yeah, and I mean, the great thing is now it's completely reasonable to have a skill in your character that you just use occasionally, right? Like every 5 minutes you might have a situation where you need to use that, and that's actually fine and completely reasonable.
Yeah, so I'm playing a Grenader, and I would be like, okay, I should only use this grenade normally, is what I would be like in Path of Exile, because this is the best grenade, or maybe this one that does like interacts with it in some way, the obvious combo. But now I'm actually like, well, there's a reason I could use those lightning ones to apply shock, because I have all these shock support gems that I'm not using anywhere else, because I'm using the damage and the LMP on my big damage dealers. I can put the shock things on there, and I can actually have a shock setup. I can incorporate that into my build.
100%.
I can incorporate poison into my build to strip their armor and whatnot. And that
maybe you only use that
do.
occasionally when you face something that's got heavy armor, you know?
Yeah.
But it's like,
exactly.
you know, it's like that kind of stuff I really want to be viable. And that situational stuff, I think, just makes the game way more interesting.
It's really feeding into the flavor of the Mercenary as like this like prepared kind of fighter who has all these tools at their disposal as well. Like, you're like, oh, I have this grenade for if I get into this situation, and this grenade for this one. It's so good.
Yeah, nice.
I love it. I've a couple of questions here. People definitely have been asking about like Vaal skills and transfigured gems and stuff and like that. I feel like this sort of thing doesn't make sense at launch exactly.
Yeah, because ultimately, if we were going to add something like that, it would make sense to add it just as another skill. So at this point, there's no real reason to do that. Like that kind of stuff comes in when we want to have a specific reward system somewhere that wants to be able to do that, and so we don't really need to do it right now. But look, we might decide to bring that theme back in a reward system later.
Yeah, I think
like that.
for Vaal skills especially, it's a cool flavor.
Yeah, for sure.
Like
but I think the transfigured thing is also interesting. Like, if you're looking to be able to, like, the reason why transfigured was nice is because it's like we got to sort of iterate on a bunch of different themes around the same skill, which obviously at this point we don't need to do that because we're already just having to make, you're still adding the skills. You know what I mean? So all the iterations of it are like less of a necessary thing. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll be doing more stuff like that in the future. Like we absolutely will be.
Do you know how many skills roughly you have / are going to end up with?
I actually don't know the number off the top of my head, but what I will say is that we initially, I think, when we announced like what the full game would have, we said 240. And I'm pretty sure we're actually nearing that. I feel
definitely it's going to be way higher than
that.
that.
Yeah, because I think we're nearing that now when we've only added half the classes. So I think that means that there's going to be a lot more than that.
100 of them or whatever are like some little utility skill or whatever, but there's even if you discount for those, it's
I know, no, that's a lot.
You got what, like,
because there's 20 to 25 for each of the for each class. So just with 6 of those, I'm terrible at math in my head. But I feel like that's 120. Well, let's say it's just a bit over 110 or something. Like, end up around there, 120, something like that. I think probably 120. Around there, like that. But then you've also got all the buff gems as well, and like each character class has 9 of those. So that then sort of adds up. And so you've already reached probably 200 just by the time you've got to there. And then it doesn't even count things that really are skills, but like are not, you don't get them via a skill gem. So like we're talking about all the ascendancy little skills, and there's like uniques that have little skill things on them.
All staffs, wands, and scepters have a skill
exactly, right? We're not even counting that, right? Like, because the staffs, wands, and scepters have skills built in.
Yeah.
And then those are like, that's another. How many of those? There's like 20 of those probably.
Yeah. I mean,
like if you add them all up,
I don't know who remembers all these things.
Yeah, I know, but there's no one has counted recently. But there's a bunch.
Countless skills.
Ascendancy classes with skills.
That's
true.
Tons.
Yeah,
it's tons.
Yeah. And those skills, by the way, ascendancy class skills are fully supportable.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild, because I remember you did the thing with default attack where you can support that now.
Yep, you can support default attack, and you can support any skill that comes from something.
That one caught me by surprise. I was like, oh, wow, you can actually link those up.
Yep. It's, so that you're going to end up with quite a lot going on there.
I was even surprised when I was like, oh, I can add, additional accuracy to Herald of Ice, and it like provides a buff to my character. I can like add buffs through support gems.
Well, you know why that is though, because those things like heralds are so hard to find like a good set of supports to recommend. So like, damn, we have to come up with like tons of these now. They're like really difficult.
I like that idea though. You can like create a custom aura.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
So yeah, it's that actually means it's actually nice because part of the it means that you get the feeling of having more aura effects on your character without having to have the spam of actual auras that many characters had in PoE1. Like you get to kind of have all that stuff as well. So that's been really nice.
Thanks for the invisible aura MTX. Well, it does remind me though. So with all this is very off topic, but with all the very good teasers you've been doing for like new 3D art for uniques and stuff like that, have you had any thoughts about reworking the skin transfer MTX in some way, making it more permanent?
Honestly, it's not in our thing about stuff we're thinking about. Like it'll work the same way it works for now, at least. But obviously, skin transfer in PoE2, there's a lot more cool base art.
Yeah, that's going to make people actually want to use it now.
So you'll probably be using that a lot more.
So yeah, it'd be cool to see something for that in the future potentially. So onto the end game, which was I feel like a big bulk of the announcement
for sure.
Yeah. So just as like an overview, so we have the end game versions just for beta launch, by the way.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be a lot more later.
Yeah.
We have the end game pinnacle versions of the 2 trials.
Yep.
So as like fully farmable content. They don't have trees though. Those ones.
They don't have trees, but they do have a progression system of some kind. So you've got the relics,
like
in the Sanctum sequel, and then for the Trial of Chaos, you have the inscribed ultimatums have getting mods from the end. So when you kill the final the final boss of that, which is alleged to be the Trial Master. Then you
Alleged.
yeah, then he'll drop items that can then have mods on them to make the trial itself harder. And there's also some pretty interesting ones on there that we actually were going to put in the video, but it was starting to get a bit long. Which was that you've got the thing which where you've got the bets that you can make of put up 13 exalts, and then you might get double that back if you're able to complete the thing. So those are some of the mods that can spawn on there, and as well as mods that make the actual trial harder as well. So there's things like that as well. So yeah, those two have those kind of like different outside the Atlas tree, because they're not really part of the Atlas. Like you'll get keys for them while you're playing in game, but technically speaking, they're kind of like they scale to end game, but they're not like sort of part of the whole Atlas. Like play them there.
Yeah, so they're their own distinct end game
exactly,
too.
exactly.
So there'll be 3 roguelike dungeon things that will be
Sure.
like
Or,
distinct
I
endgames.
wouldn't say 3 roguelike dungeons. I will say there will be 3 trials that have various mechanics that can be different.
Yeah.
But then of course you've got the 4 kind of what I guess would say sort of. I don't know. We actually need a name for what are we calling the things that are icons on the
because they were called leagues, but they're not really leagues.
It doesn't really make sense to call it a league exactly. That is what we call them internally. We just refer to them as like there are 4 leagues that you have that appear there.
Doesn't really work anymore, does it?
I don't have a good idea right now.
Yeah, we'll need to come up with a
we
name for
probably
that.
have actually named it. I just don't remember what it is.
Right. And then you've got the kind of boss hunting kind of element as well. And then the kind of, I guess what you would say is the pinnacle of the kind of boss hunting thing is then, you've got the cities with the lieutenants and then the Uber Act bosses. And then above that, you have the pinnacle boss who we don't want to spoil. Although I did show you a little bit about it just in private before. That one's gonna be hard. Like I know you're cooking up some pretty difficult mechanics there.
It's fun. That's the fun stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
because now you don't need to worry about if people can't progress through. It's not a progression blocker. You can just kill them.
Yeah. It's a progression blocker to difficulty to the higher difficulties though, because once you kill that,
That's
of course,
true.
then you get the increase of the difficulties, and then it's like, okay, now try it again, but way harder, and then there's four levels of difficulty for each of those for each endgame system like that.
So yeah, like apart from the trials, the endgame trials, everything has like its own distinct passive tree, and
Yes.
progression through them is also by doing them.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So we really wanted to prevent the situation where you feel like you allocate points for a certain piece of content, and then you feel like you can't do the other content because you're kind of wasting the points that you've got.
Yeah, the lock-in.
And we kind of band-aided that in PoE1 by adding multiple Atlas trees as a way. But I think the solution is much better, where effectively you can progress all of them, and you can either do just all in one for a while, or you can just do each of them as you come to them, and just add them kind of piecemeal. But either way, however you want to do it, you can make progress on your character. Well, I should say in your league for all of those, because the progress and all that stuff is of course for the whole league, not just for a single character.
Yeah, and previously we used the Atlas tree, I would say very much so, to make sure that we were doing the type of content that we wanted to do.
Yeah, so now it's not so much about finding the content, because that's what the tablets are for.
Yeah.
Now it's more about improving your ability to sustain effectively. Like you're going to want to have those points to sort of get sustainability for the next level up, and we want to make sure that there is sustain if you're doing engaging with those mechanics well.
Yeah.
But effectively you do have to actually to get sustain at higher difficulties. You will need to be able to be making smart choices in terms of allocating and using the tablets correctly and that kind of stuff. It is part of that sort of story of all of that. That's kind of the main thing with that.
Yeah, this idea of sustaining the content you want to do by doing it is a little different to how it's been in PoE1 a lot of the time, where it's like you had to fuel it by going back to maps to,
right.
get your delve juice.
I mean,
or
you're
whatever.
still doing maps ultimately, in terms of
to find more.
but effectively, so long as you're doing the content that you that you want to do, you should, and as well, and making it harder. So your build has to be good enough to be able to sustain it. Those hard. Then you will be able to sustain that stuff. And if you want every single map to have a breach in it, that's absolutely doable by using the tablets correctly.
Yeah, so the Atlas passive trees and the trees for each of the distinct types of content is about scaling the reward and difficulty primarily now.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
And what does, I saw on the breach nodes, it said increased difficulty. What does that mean?
It's somewhat arbitrary and asymmetric, but it will feel like, for example, some of the difficulties will actually change the boss's skills and how they work.
Wow.
Generally, they'll increase the level of the area, right? So you get the general monster and life scaling, but arguably to a player that's arbitrary as well, because they don't know how that scales. And in other contexts, it might be more of certain monster types, less of others, and stuff like that. It is generally so the small nodes will increase difficulty of the meta content, whereas the notables will increase the reward of the in-map content. But when I say difficulty, that is reward as well. So an example of how this works is like, let's say the boss has 6 uniques it could drop, or 5 or 6 uniques. It can drop 3 at difficulty 0. Then at, say, difficulty 1, it can drop, maybe has increased level or higher item level, some rarity. Now also that when I say rarity, also do note rarity does increase the grade of items, not just
that's wild.
making them yellow or orange. It does make them better yellows or better not better oranges.
Right?
But it does affect, it affects other things about items than just the rarity.
Yes. And so, when I talk about just getting rarity here, I don't want people to, and PoE1 players in particular, to think, they're just going to go from yellow to more yellow. So anyway, and, maybe the next tier will add a unique to the pool, like a more, what we hope will be more valuable unique. And then the next one can do a bit more rarity, something else maybe, introduce a different unique perhaps. And then the last difficulty introduces something ideally, without giving away exact specifics of them, more in the line of a modular unique item, say like Megalomaniac or like Forbidden Flesh and Flame from PoE1. So a unique item that is ideally very powerful, very chase, but has a lot of different combinations. Watcher's Eye is another good example, right? So a new series of jewels is a good example. There are other uniques that are modular and stuff, and that comes in at the last tier. And so you want to really be getting to that hardest difficulty so you can be getting these like farming for these extremely good, powerful, unique items. But of course, you have the thing, if you're never ready for it, if you try it and you're like, oh, this is too hard, you can always just respec the nodes.
Yeah, you can unspec them away and then not, just effectively decide, like, I've got these points, but I'm not, I want to go back and do this later. And so that ability to effectively configure the difficulty like that, I think is...
So if you're maybe target farming one of the uniques, the difficulty 0 drops, you might want to just be like, I'll do that. I'll do the difficulty stuff later and I'll just farm it at this difficulty. So,
and I think that's a much better way than than some of the systems we've used to scale that in the past. And the nice thing is, of course, with difficulty is that we can effectively use whatever scaling levers we want to make that more difficult without necessarily having to, because we could have been like, you increase difficulty, it's like 200% life or something like that. But by effectively being a bit more vague about it, we can actually specifically tailor the difficulties of the different tiers, with more specific changes.
Yeah, this multiple projectile thing you shoot has more projectiles.
Sure, and that kind of thing. So, just whatever we feel works best for making this particular fight more difficult.
It seems like there's a lot more for players to kind of discover experimentally as they progress.
For sure.
In what ways they're getting harder. And that is going to be different for different players too, where a different build is affected by a difficulty change more so than others.
Potentially.
And that's an interesting question as well, I think, where how much are you guys pitching these sorts of distinct endgame pieces of content at being completable by the same build or by encouraging players to make a different build that's better at certain
So this is a very difficult one, and it's something that we've discussed a bit recently is the harder you make the hardest content, the less builds will be considered viable by the players because effectively a build's only viable if it can defeat the pinnacle boss at difficulty 4. That will be kind of the general perception. So we have to be really I actually don't know necessarily what the right answer here is.
Yeah.
We have the ability. I mean, maybe you feel like you do, but I don't think you do.
I wouldn't say I'm 100% confident on it, but I'll have a go at it.
Look, there's going to be iteration here because what we'll see is if we find that there's only some particularly abusive, only the most abusive stuff is possibly able to defeat the hardest content, that we might have to dial it back a bit.
Yeah.
But it's going to be a bit of experimentation, and it's very hard at this point to be able to pitch that because we don't have the crazy history. PoE does not have the history of PoE1 to be able to to know kind of what is the right life value to have on a difficulty 4 pinnacle boss. How do we even know that at this point, really, without,
That being said, though, the bosses are a lot more skill-based and tactical, right? At the end of the day, the gear is, to some degree, necessary because no one can really make no mistake for some amount of time. So you do have that thing and you do need to mitigate certain things, but a lot of these are very dodge roll tactical or using certain skills or mitigation tactics or whatever. There's heaps of different things to bypass the things that make them hard, for sure. But I would say it is very much, a lot of skill is involved. especially when it comes to some of these with dodge rolling. Like, I'm trying to emphasize that quite a bit. Or blocking, if you want to do a different way about it. Not to say you must block, but yes, dodge roll is a pretty key mechanic here, and I'd say we're certainly upping the emphasis on using it and using it well as you get into these higher tiers. But gear is always a way, and combinations of uniques and passive tree and builds is always a way to go, I'm not good at dodge rolling, I'm going to gear around that skill check and become strong enough to defeat the boss.
Or another skill, like some sort of skill that helps you block,
or
shield block,
using skills in the mix is fine, But I would say pretty generally you can take, I'd say any decent character, you get you gear up all the way, and as long as you're good enough, that is a way to defeat them. I would say there's no real hard requirement on doing something crazy niche or out there or complicated.
You're certainly not going the route of like, this boss is fire immune or something.
Oh, no.
Thanks.
No.
We've been through that already.
Yeah.
Excellent. So this very cute atlas, this infinitely expanding civilization map-esque atlas, which I know you're particularly fond of, Jonathan.
Yep.
What's kind of the idea here? Like, is the layout the same for everyone? Is it the same across the league?
So it's the
Procedurally
same for all
generated?
your characters in the league, but the layout is different for everyone. It is random.
Okay.
So you're gonna have to find stuff. Like, it works like Delve in this respect, which is obviously
Yeah.
a league that I was particularly a fan of.
Yeah.
I'm just a really what I really wanted is I wanted a feeling of exploration in the Atlas, and it's something that we sort of tried to do with the Atlas and PoE 1, with that feeling of kind of, having the connected areas and exploring, but it didn't feel like exploration in quite the same way that this does.
Yeah.
That's a feeling I loved, and it's one of the reasons I love Delve. So that's, kind of where this was coming from. And at the same time, it's sort of solving various other problems that we've always had where, one of the things that's really cool to do is to be able to have things like, okay, like in this area, you've got like this item drops and like that kind of thing. Like I guess in PoE 1 you had div cards, but yet there was always a problem where if you have differences between in-game areas in a system that works like PoE 1 does, then effectively that's the only map people, like whatever the best map is, that's the one everyone will run like continuously forever.
Yep.
So effectively, we wanted to try and make sure that you actually like had an experience that had more variety while still retaining the whole like I get to play the content that I want. So ideally with the Atlas we kind of get that we've got in PoE 2, we get to kind of have both of the best of both worlds. We get to make sure that there is some variety. You feel like you're exploring. But because once you've run a map, that's run, and now you have to, move on and do it and find another one. It's not just like just play one map again and again and again. But yet the content, can be added to it. You can do things if you like the particular maps, because there are biomes and you can see them from far away. You can be like, okay, I know there's a particular desert map that's great, so I'm going to go for deserts, and that's fine. You can do that kind of thing. So you've both got controllability, but also the ability for us to kind of make more variants.
You get a lot more very high satisfying spikes.
Yeah.
Where, like, for example, you get more variables where you just have, okay, there are like 4 towers, really. You've got a good tower cluster, and you've got really good maps in that range. So, like, there are maps. So, in Path of Exile 1, for example, the range is effectively, say, how do I quantify this? Like, say, 350 monsters up to 700 monsters.
Yeah.
Whereas the range here is like 300 monsters up to like 1,500 monsters, much more drastic range. Now, those numbers are arbitrary, but it is approximately the representation of the range. Obviously, you then modify it and add more to it and all of that. So you will have some maps that are like extremely good with Delirium, and some maps that are like way better with something more like Breach.
Yeah.
Because Delirium enhances the monsters of the map, whereas Breach entirely adds the monsters. And you will even have things where there are maps that are like way more magic monsters, way more rare monsters. And so you probably want that with, pick your league of your choosing and whatnot. You have all these variables that are at play, and so you all of a sudden find a really good set of towers with some really good maps and radius, and then you'll get really good tablet modifiers, and then you'll get really good maps with really good prefixes, and you want to just combine all of this and you obviously instill them all, and you corrupt them all. And there's the corruption influence.
We didn't show that,
and so
did we?
then there's the corruption influence on them. And it's like,
okay,
like...
It is possible for there on one map to be many, many mechanics stacked to the point of craziness.
So it sounds like the juicing is definitely there.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's important, right? I mean, like, that's part of the PoE experience. For 100%.
But how much control do you have as a player, though, over min-maxing your just exploration of the Atlas map?
So effectively,
can you do better in some way?
So effectively, what you're going to want to do is the towers are where you go to like see areas around, and then there's the structure of the connections is quite open. So like you can beeline for things pretty well.
Yeah.
Like if you you can certainly see a lot more maps than what you play, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So because of that, choosing what you want
choices.
is easy to do.
And you can kind of see the towers in the fog.
Yeah, so you can see the towers in the fog from a distance, which means that like a lot of the time it's like go to a tower, you'll see some maps you want to play, you go play those, then it's like the next tower is just a few other maps away. Go to that tower, see the next area, and so on.
I'm guessing that's like a certain range out you can see. Into the fog of war.
The fog kind of in 3D the fog's actually a 3D thing, and it rises slowly as you get away from where the thing is. So that's how you kind of get the towers to.
Cool. So you might see a cluster of towers off somewhere. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. You can see that.
It sounds like this is like potentially an infinitely expanding map that is going to be by the end of someone's league quite big.
Yes. So we actually need to add a search feature. I don't know if they've done it yet for finding specific maps that haven't been run yet.
Yeah,
we have a few things. Like there's a button you can press and it like goes to your last map round, one that goes back to a home base, and one that goes to some of the special, more iconic things you find. But we certainly need more. 100%.
Yeah.
So that is something we will be working on. Hopefully it's there. Who knows?
And so Waystones have a tier, but they don't have specific maps on them anymore, which obviously shrinks that whole map pool thing down substantially. What sort of impact does that have?
It'll make the map stash tab a little easier to manage. That's good.
Yeah, so have you thought about like what sort of, economic consequences that have for like how players progress through maps? Is it easier to do when you don't have to collect all of these individual maps to get the completion bonuses and stuff like we do currently? Like we have that whole hunting down over 100 maps to get completion for. That's
now you're hunting, you're hunting certain valuable maps, you're hunting towers, you're hunting content, you're hunting, the warlord, the faction leaders to get the pinnacle.
Yeah.
You're hunting unique maps, a very different thing for sure, as opposed to, and then the item is all about, I've just got a key, I just want good modifiers. There's not really all that whole other variable to it. So there's still a lot of interesting choice and access, but we've taken it from the item and put it on the actual world map. But it's cool. It also makes you just feel like you're traversing a world. You're not instantly like finishing the campaign, very grounded, and now I'm in space. Like Path of Exile does have that.
I only literally just thought about that. I was going to ask about that. So, the mapping system was always this like extra dimensional kind of unknown thing. It's pretty interesting, but it is a little weird.
So we wanted to start with to actually like at least, look, I'm sure we'll get to the extra dimensional beings eventually, but at least to start with, we wanted to have a bit more grounded initially.
Yes, you're on the planet.
Yeah.
Right, you're in
you're on the planet. That's like a good thing. We haven't become a sci-fi crazy, but you haven't gone to the moon yet.
Yes. Well, even then, we were saying like, can we at least before we go to outer space, go to the moon first? Like, how many moons are we? Don't. There's a whole complicated thing we need to figure out there.
Wow. I feel like there's a delve but up league coming. All right. So we've got this 1 in 4 maps is boss maps, and then that means the other 3 are not boss maps.
Yes.
What does a non-boss map look like? How do you win it?
So effectively what you need to do is kill the rares in the map to remove the corruption and finish it. Once you get down below 50 monsters, it will point out any rares that are remaining. There'll be a little marker just so you know.
I was worried about that.
Honestly, I wouldn't expect that to even be necessary most of the time because the layouts are kind of designed so that, if you generally speaking, you want to clear the maps to find the rares anyway because those are the one, those have good drops. And effectively, the only reason that you would need that marker thing is just occasionally you get some slightly weird degenerate layout where there's some side bit you didn't notice or something like that, and then that's where you have to go. So generally speaking, you'll be able to make your way around and kill them all.
The goal of the player is you're cleansing corruption from the world, you're bringing order back, stuff like that. So you even get the thing on the map where you're like, if there's some corruption-y looking stuff around the map, when you complete the map, that gets purged away. So you feel like you're reverse painting the map a little bit. And
you're cleaning up.
It can actually be quite satisfying as you're like changing all the nodes from one color to another, and you're like, this is fun. I'm like,
But ultimately, what we wanted to do is we wanted boss combat in PoE 2 to matter when we have it.
Yeah.
And so in order, like if you have a map boss every area, then if we made it so the boss combat mattered enough, like in order to actually balance it that way,
stressful.
It's too much. Like it actually is like, you know, you spend too much of your time fighting bosses.
Yeah.
So effectively, if that's what you want to do now, you can do it because there's bosses there. You know, like when I say 1 in 4 maps is a map boss, that doesn't mean that 1 in 4 maps you play is one, because you know obviously you can pick what content you're doing by exploring
you can
around.
chain
You're
the
picking
map
your
boss.
pathing and your path.
Exactly. So effectively, if you want to hunt the bosses, then that is the thing you can do. If you want to just like do some mindless grinding for a while, you can do that too. And what it means is we can actually make the bosses way more rewarding. They can drop way more items than they were going to because of the fact that there's not one at the end of every area, right? Like we can actually, and the fight is substantial. You get a lot of drops. That actually is something.
And they get their own tree.
And they what? Oh yeah, I don't know. Right, you mean the boss killing tree? Yes, there's a tree for boss hunting. Sorry, I thought you meant every boss had its own tree. And I was like, geez, did you do some
the
design
next
while I
step.
wasn't doing well? I was looking.
Not yet.
Josh was like, wait, no, wait, stop. It's too much.
Jeez.
That's like a year 3 feature.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, we'll keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's actually like I do love that there's a boss hunting because I'm super into that. There's a boss hunting tree that you can fill out as well. So how do you get points on that? Like,
Yeah, so effectively, I mean, well, you can.
You get a lot of points for the core tree. There's a core tree that affects all mapping. That all of things like pack size, quant rarity, and you've got multiple keystones that all can work together, and all can. So I think there's 3 of them. One plays on like corrupted maps. One plays on like prefixes and suffixes, and I can't remember what the other one does right in this very moment. But you obviously get that core tree, and then you have a boss tree, and then obviously all the different league and pinnacle content trees. So you get those points by just completing maps. It just has you effectively get a quest, and effectively it's like you complete 10 maps, you get your first 2 points, and then like complete X maps and one, goes up the chain.
But of certain tiers, like
of at least tier 1, at least tier 2, at least
tier 3. This is the tier
3.
climb, effectively, where it's like as you get up the higher tiers and clear maps of certain tiers, that's when you start getting points for the Atlas.
At like maybe say the third one, I can't remember the exact specifics. It's like complete this and defeat a boss, and then later it's defeat at least 5 bosses at something, and so killing bosses get generated.
It sounds way better for fresh starts. I'm not having to like go and get that Bestiary map that I missed or something. It's
yeah, for sure.
I'm just doing content. I'm
but
just doing good content.
But it is kind of the analog of that in a way, because like it's that feeling of like I've got a system to progress through. Like I need to meet these objectives, and
definitely got a lot of
progression. And from that you're getting the the Atlas passive points and so on.
Cool.
So yeah, that's kind of the idea.
Yeah, so you can really like focus in on map blasting with the bossless maps, and or on bossing content if you want to, or on breaches, or on.
And you can always put
ritual.
a breach on a map with a boss, right? You can do both.
Yeah, like they can have you can have every type of content in one map if you want.
Yeah, is like a boss map a kind of like a distinct thing from like a regular map in terms of like the layout or the thing you've done?
Technically, they are separate, but generally speaking.
They'll be like similar.
Yeah, they're basically the same.
They're pretty similar.
They're pretty similar.
So there'll be like a boss estuary and a non-boss estuary.
Yeah, there are some cases at the moment where there are some maps that can't have a boss, and because we haven't done the one that would go here is not in early access yet, and that kind of thing. But effectively, as I said, generally speaking, it'll be 1 in 4 that you'll find.
Okay, excellent. So I think that covers. Did I miss some things from? You've got like all the smaller contents, like the strongboxes and essences and things like that.
So initially, we actually had a design where everything, like even all the smaller content, there was still going to be icons for it on the tree. On the Atlas.
Yeah.
But we actually found that it meant that when you were actually exploring, it felt like there was nothing random to find. So we wanted to make sure we also have kind of just completely random stuff that like doesn't have a progression system that you just run into randomly, because that's fun too. And we'll probably be adding more stuff like that as well over time. That's just like I randomly encountered this, and that was like not expected. So
is that sort of stuff on the core Atlas tree at all? Yeah. So you can kind of like see more of that if you want to.
Yeah.
Yep.
Great.
And often mods on the items as well. On keep waystones.
Yeah. Cool. Yep.
Lots of different names. Maps, waystones, same thing.
Yes, I've had to keep kind of correcting myself about that. I was like, I don't know.
I mean,
guess
look,
it's not really
internally, we definitely call them maps all the time. The thing is the only reason why it doesn't make sense thematically is because a map does imply it's of a specific location, whereas a waystone can take you to anywhere.
Yes.
So that's the reason why the name change had to happen. But I think that probably even players will probably just call them maps, I bet, just because, that's the peer we want to get.
So we've got the Breach, Delirium, Ritual, Expedition, those like leagues that maybe need a new name.
Yep.
Is there another one that you're just both personally really keen to bring back in the future?
Oh, I mean, like I've always wanted to have Delve again, but I kind of got a bit of that wish with this system.
Yeah.
It's also a very like content heavy league to make because you need to make tons of encounters and doing
there's
it
a lot
properly is a
there.
huge thing. But I mean, look, I love Incursion as well. It's one of my favorites. Like I'm keen for that. I don't know if there's anything other than that you're really keen for.
There's a lot, especially because there's a lot we can do with all this new art, new monsters, right? Like, for example, if you just take Legion had all those 5 civilizations. We've now got an entire new array of Vaal monsters, Vaal bosses, etc., that we can use as a baseline. We've got way better, consistent direction on what's going on there. Heaps of stuff, new animation, and the capacities are just like out of control. But then you've got, Incursion. We've got, awesome Vaal artwork we can use there and make that all awesome and nice. New corruption mechanics that we can extrapolate on.
You don't want to have a roof as the boss anymore?
Nah, we're not just going to have a floating roof. The Omnitex is just a small floating roof.
Oh, you're keeping with the theme of vacuum cleaners. Yeah.
Well,
standing and then
mistakes
the
were
Roomba.
made. Now we have minimum. That's a world
Minimum
where you
vacuum
had super
cleaners?
uniques with 1 or 2 skills.
Yeah.
Right. There's only so much you can do with a floating roof. So anyway, and then I don't know, even like Bestiary coming back with something because we've got all these awesome bosses, way grander in scale, and you can do these more grand hunts for them as opposed to just like,
that'd be so
I'm like
good
in a
in
city
this.
and there's a rare spider, You can just get way more epic and way more involved and with all the new art and so much stuff to like.
A Bestiary 2 that's like hunting big beasts and preparing for them and tracking them. That'd be pretty cool.
Exactly.
I'd definitely take some mercenary action into that. Be a good fit, I feel. All right. Well, there's lots for us to look forward to there. You have some kind of like penned already for adding to the beta.
I mean, all plans can change, but there are absolutely. I mean, look, that we've done things like commissioning art assets and so on. Like we've got,
So there's stuff coming
there's
already.
stuff coming along. It's
Wow.
just a question of like, when we actually get
That's
there,
committed.
what's it going to look like?
Yep. All right. Let's talk about crafting a little bit because you've done a lot there, and it's pretty fundamental to the game, I think. So, what's the core of what you're trying to do with crafting in Path of Exile 2 compared to Path of Exile 1? Kind of noting that you've really kind of stepped back from the idea of like reforging an item many times or scouring it.
So we really want to make it so that you're finding crafting items all the time. You're using those crafting items way more often than you were in PoE 1.
Yeah.
That you like the game of like picking something up, like seeing what I could modify it to, and then actually equipping those items is just happening way more often. And there's so many subtle changes around this, like in terms of just like the way that the base mods scale and items and the like things like that, like all the stuff to kind of make it so that as you find new base types and new things, like you've got a reason to craft them. Part of that is making sure that you've got enough of that currency. It actually took us a long time to even get comfortable with the idea of making something like an Exalt drop that often, because there's just this thing and you're cemented in your mind of like this is rare, right? Like it's an Exalt, how can it possibly drop like multiple times in Act 1? Like it just seems crazy. But with the way like removing scouring affected so much of the way that we can craft. Like I know that you noted earlier that you can. There's so many more things you're allowed to craft now that you weren't allowed
you can
to before.
craft relics, which
yes,
were
and the reason
uncraftable.
why that's allowed is because without scouring, like those crafts become one-time things, which means that it's actually okay to allow for that stuff. And I think that's opened up a huge amount of stuff. There's so many more types that can be crafted.
It adds so much more value to the dropped item as well.
Exactly. So that stuff has just, I think, opened up a huge amount there. And it also has, and this wasn't necessarily an explicit goal right at the beginning, but it's also meant that the game of like, I'm just going to click again and again as my crafting session is no longer really the meta.
Not just spam re-rolling.
Yeah, exactly. Like everything kind of is something that you want to be able to use.
You
a
are
few
still
times.
reforging and meta crafting things.
Oh yeah,
You've
yeah.
got
We've still got stuff
nulls.
like that, right? We've
You've
got a nulls and you've got
chaos that does
but that stuff
add
is
remove.
higher up. Like that's
Yeah.
kind of more of a later game
It's
thing. Yeah, exactly. Because you have to think about it after each time. Of like, will I improve this? Will I make it worse?
Yeah.
There's stuff to do there, and like like the meta crafting that omens can do. Is also very interesting. Like there's some pretty powerful stuff there. But once again, we introduced that stuff later on, and so effectively we want to I guess for lack of a better word, democratize crafting at early levels, like make sure that everyone's able to do that stuff while having the more advanced stuff be kind of a little bit later.
We certainly had a goal at one point where I was like, we're talking with Rishi, and I'm like, if every single time we're doing alpha wipes or getting the staff to play, if I am not seeing and hearing about people using exalts during Act 1, then we have failed, and we need to drop more of them. And so we ended up, like, I would say honestly, in the last month, we have like over like 8 to 10 times the amount of currency dropping, you know, and there's the cool things about it as well, which are the subtle things, like a boss is way more likely to drop the higher tier currencies and stuff because, again, rarity affects that as well now. So you're like way more incentivized to go and kill bosses to get them, and there's heaps of awesome stuff around there. But we're actually now finding people are exalting gear during the campaign, throwing it on weapons and building weapons from scratch that you find are very good. Transmute, Org, Regal, Exalt. That process is like...
Transmute, Org, Regal, Exalt is like a thing that you're doing often. And enjoy, and when you find good bases and you do stuff with that.
I can speak to that experience. So I've played probably 6-ish hours. I'm most of the way through Act 2 on my mercenary, and I've found maybe 6 or 7 exalts. I took a ring from like a 1 blue stat ring that had a nice roll, maybe a nice life roll or something, and crafted it up to 6 property rare. And I crafted a crossbow that I found with good sockets that had a good damage roll on it, and I took that to 6 properties with multiple damage mods. And I'm like, each time that power was going up, and so I was doing that.
It feels good.
I felt like the bottleneck was regals, which was actually kind of interesting because I don't know if that's intentional or just luck, because I did really have to think about which blue items were good enough to take to a rare so that I could then put my exalts on them.
So you get more of those by disenchanting rares.
Yeah, they are farmable.
So they are farmable, which is completely intentional. We want to make sure that, like, if you don't have enough of those, like, so generally speaking, it's like you're going to want to keep, like, I feel like once you get like more than like 5 or 6 transmutes, then you stop disenchanting blues and start selling them instead. And the same thing can be true also for regals, where it's like, okay, once you've got more than a certain amount, then you're like, okay, I can stop having to disenchant the stuff and kind of switch over. But the nice thing is like when you don't have enough, there is a way to get them, which I think is really important. And the same is true with the socket currency as well, where it's like, when you don't have enough, you can start salvaging. I know you were telling me you were buying stuff from the vendor with sockets in order to salvage it.
I surprised them with my my methods, my degenerate ways.
So that stuff, it's just really nice to have for people to have the ability to, to get that stuff when they need it. And so it's nice that like all that really basic stuff of just like getting items to better tiers and is now way easier to get. And that solved a problem that we had through quite a lot of the betas, where people were saying they didn't feel like they had enough control, like they didn't feel like they had a way to advance their character when they needed to be able to solve specific problems. And I think the socket thing really has helped a lot with that now, because now we have a way finally to be like, okay, if I need a bunch of fire resist, there is a way to get that, and I've got the tools to do it, and I've got items I can use to do this stuff. So that has helped a huge amount, I think, of solving those like issues that come up with your character.
And this is to confirm how you've solved bench crafting. The question of that.
We went through so many iterations of bench stuff. It was like a huge thing. We implemented tons of UI. Like there was tons of wasted time there implementing crafting bench things. The problem that we had was that the systems that we were making, it's like we could balance them in the ways the players were happy with, and then the designers were very unhappy. Or we could balance them the way the designers were happy with and the players were unhappy. And it's like when you've got a system where like you're fighting the players for how the balance should be, like you can tell that means you have a system that is bad. But I think we were very I myself honestly was too slow to recognize the fact that a complete overhaul was needed. And then at some point the socket stuff originally came from the Vaal Orb. Like it was designed there. And then at some point, I don't know who came up with it. I think it might have just been you who said like, why don't we just
Rishi.
Rishi thought of that. Okay, yeah. So Rishi thought of the idea of like, hey, what if we just put sockets, in early game? What if you got them in Act 1? What if you had runes that would let you get the basic boss as the way of solving the remedial crafting problem? And so then suddenly, as soon as we do that, it's like, oh, like I'm happy, players are happy, everyone's happy. So that means we have a good system that is working and gets those good feelings. So that I think was a real win. I love how that system is feeling at the moment.
Yeah, so the bench was achieving 2 things kind of in its way, which was maybe even 3. Gear customization for one, like you take an item and you can do something more to it, firstly. And then you've got the problem fixing of like, I need a bit more fire resistance.
Yes.
And then the third thing was like the meta crafts. So you've handled those each in different ways.
Exactly.
You've got the runes, which do the first 2 things. The customization and the problem fixing. So early on,
but I think for the customization, it's the what do you call them? The soul cores. like the runes are more about the kind of like I need to fix resistances, whereas the soul cores are more about like I want to customize my items in different ways than what I would otherwise normally be able to do. And then of course you've got the omens to solve the metacrafting problem. So we've effectively moved all that stuff around. And essences, of course, yes, of course. So essences, what they allow you to do is get 2 deterministic mods. So because you can upgrade to blue, but you can also upgrade from blue to rare with an essence as well. So that lets you kind of get some of that stuff, and then plus some of the omen things you can. There's stuff you can do there that is I think going to be pretty interesting.
And that's just at the start of release.
Yeah, because obviously there's going to be more, of course, as we add more things.
So I was worried that some of the changes you're making might move us away from some of the like deep, impactful crafting that we have, but it sounds like you are still allowing like powerful meta crafting and the ability to make like a really good item.
For sure.
But you're also making sure that like the physical item itself that you find matters more.
Absolutely. And I mean, like the more subtle,
that's what it's all about, right?
There's so much more going on. I think just like clever things we've done with the item system as well. Like one of the things I love that we did is we've made it so that so we've got blue and yellow chests you can find now, and we've changed the world generation so that if a dead end is generated, the chance that you get a rare chest there is way higher. So effectively, if a rare chest will spawn in the area, then it will choose dead ends first to go there.
You feel better about the dead ends
effectively. So like that means that we effectively mean that like when like it makes the world feel like as far as item drops go, that like it feels intentional, right? Like I went down this into this dead end room, but look, there was a rare chest there, so I feel happy about it. Like that kind of thing is really cool. So there's things like that, but there's also the way that so we've alluded to it a few times, but the way that rarity now works, where the mods get better as rarity increases, and also things like the you get better currency rather than just it means we don't have to have like the spam of items that's like crazy. Like you actually feel like that you kill a boss and it drops good shit, as opposed to just lots of shit. That's I'm a big fan of how this feels. I think it's a lot better. But it does mean though, of course, if you're a PoE1 player and you see a boss kill, like the number of like the expectation of like, because a PoE1 player looks at the amount of spam on the screen to some level as the way of like knowing how good the drops were.
Now,
of course, you got item filters and everything.
We
to
have
kind of
quantity
improve that.
brain rot.
Yeah, exactly. So exactly, that is a good way of putting it. It really is more about like are the items actually good? Like ideally, you kill a boss and you pick every item it drops up. Like that is to me is a win, and I think we're basically getting it at that point.
I quite like how the exploration systems and that as well, with the chests down dead ends and things like that, acts as a player leveler in some ways, where like a player is struggling.
The more you explore, the more stuff you'll find, and that's true as well for the optional encounters around the place as well. If you're struggling, go fight some optional content. There'll be stuff there that can drop, and and you will definitely find more things. And
lots of guaranteed rare items here and there,
exactly.
and like that. So this little boss here will drop a rare caster item, and like heaps of stuff.
And the funny thing about that is that stuff came about a little bit from the fact that we actually had a problem where people were just face tanking bosses and dying over and over again. And they keep on respawning, and they would never be like, oh, I'm going to go away and actually find some other stuff. And so I was thinking for a long time about like, well, why is it that in other games that people don't do that? Like if I'm playing Elden Ring and I die to a boss 10 times, I'm not just gonna like just continue doing that. I'm gonna be like, oh, maybe I'll go do something else for a while. So we realized that the map, like the idea of just there's lots of stuff to find, like is actually a really important part of that. So in PoE2 now, one of the recent things, and it's taken a lot of work from people to get this working, but now all of that you can see all this sort of weird side encounters that have specific drops on the map. And that means that if you're having trouble with the boss, you're like, oh, you know what, I'm just gonna go do some other stuff. And then you'll come back and you will be powerful enough to kill the boss much more easily because you do absolutely find the rewarding things.
There's a little chest on there or a little campsite.
There's lots of little hard-coded drops from specific bosses. The hard-coded drops, they only drop one time, so you can't just farm them endlessly. But effectively, if you go do all that side content and you check it all off, you'll get some very rewarding stuff.
Yeah, you got some pretty clever systems there. And I definitely noted I was using the map thing a lot to be like, oh, well, to be completionist about it a bit. But also, just being aware of like, oh, cool, there's some good stuff in this zone that I can come and find. And I think we figured out that some of that stuff reveals after you like find the waypoint in a zone.
I think that's how it works. Is that?
Yeah, it's either there's a few. So it's like either because an NPC told you about an area, in which case it just happens to be revealed, or at the very least, yes, when you get there. Generally, it's just when you get there you see everything.
Okay.
But yeah, there's a few different conditions that will reveal everything. It kind of depends. Like a lot of people just click through the dialogue, so they'll never know the NPC told them, but they maybe did.
I was checking my map kind of like when I went into a zone, and then maybe afterwards to see if there was anything.
But like
interesting
you
I
never
missed.
get to an area and don't see some unless they are like very obviously hidden intentional secrets that
There's nearly
they
something
might
everywhere.
they might be there, they might not
Yes,
be.
I found
That's-
half of your key for your secret quest.
Oh yeah, don't worry about that.
So pivoting into economy and trading, the exchange from Path of Exile's one experiment recently. We got a chance to actually try that live in the field, and it seems from the player's perspective it was a smash hit.
Yeah, definitely for us as well.
Yeah,
like,
okay.
solved a lot. Like
Great.
we're 100% on board with that. It's very good.
Was
Yeah.
the least stressful league I ever played. I mean,
Same.
what normally caused almost all
Literally
the
my
anger and
favourite.
friction for me was
Yes.
especially bulk trading. It was
Incredible.
horrible, and I
So
was just
good.
like, oh, this is like a dream come true.
Myself and so many other players, I feel like we're more engaged in endgame. We were able to do the thing we wanted to do more, and we're just less aggravated on a moment-to-moment basis. It's good. So, do you take that then as like as a big positive for it going into Path of Exile 2?
100%.
And how do you feel like it adapts to the game being quite different in the end? Because they are pretty different games. Like the economy works a bit differently.
I mean, honestly, I think it will just work. I mean, look, we have no idea what the trade values will settle on and like how that'll end up. But
Is it going to be chaos? Is it going to be exalted?
but ultimately, I think that the trades effectively Settlers was a test of what the economy will be like in PoE2, and to some extent because of the way that we did the gold and everything.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty confident that that's going to be okay. But obviously, you never know, right? Like when lots of people hit the economy, what can happen? Hopefully, we don't cause like horrible hyperinflation or have some horrible issue like that. But I guess partly this is what an early access is to find out, right? Like whether there's any issues like that.
Was there any
economy testing?
Was there any surprises with that or with gold in terms of how things panned out?
Thankfully not, honestly. Like
Right.
we were worried, but thankfully none of the like horrible situations came to pass with that, and it ended up working just fine. So it went great.
Who'd have thought 10 years later we'd be back here saying, you know what? Gold was a good idea. You just had to do it right.
Exactly.
Because I remember 10 years ago,
it's
we're
funny,
like,
but it's
this
funny.
game's brilliant. It has no gold. Stupid gold.
But the funny thing is I don't think we would have arrived at the way gold is now if we had had it in the first place.
Yeah.
Like the non-tradability of it, like using it as a sort of marker for how much play you've done.
Yeah.
I don't think that we would have ever had that way if we hadn't arrived from here. So
Yeah.
I think that path dependency kind of did matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
the paths we weave. So, how likely then, based on just how successful it is, are you to want to expand the exchanges capabilities to like other things like maps or waystones or even gear?
Well, I mean, look, I'm interested in this, but I don't think it's necessary right now. So we're not going in early access, at least. We're not going to launch with any expanded stuff in that way. But I guess I do want to sort of see how it works, and I'm interested in potentially trying something like that in the future. I just don't like. The currency exchange was like 90% of the problem.
Yeah.
And so fixing that
agree.
like fixed a lot of the, like it seemed like we would need to do more initially, and then maybe now it's seeming like maybe we don't, but I still want to experiment with it potentially. So I'm interested to see how it goes. But the currency exchange definitely helped a vast amount.
Those
of
were
it.
the annoying trades.
Yeah,
most
they
of
were
the
for
time.
sure. They were.
Yeah.
Yep, definitely.
Great. So we've had some, so this is a tricky question to answer, especially if we could just scroll down. Okay.
Yeah.
So what are you aiming for in terms of Path of Exile 2's kind of like personal player economy and progression? So how much resources you're acquiring, how you're using them, but also how much are you getting from trade versus from yourself?
I mean,
Solo
this is a tricky
self-out.
question, but I mean, I think that really the feeling of like being able to trade is super important. So being able to get that stuff, I think, is good. Like not everyone wants to do that. You need to be able to progress through the game well without having to do much trade. But I do think that look, it's definitely going to be the case that if you're playing in a trade league, you're going to have the ability to
accelerates
you
everything,
very significantly, and that's the case, and it will continue to be the case. And
Yeah.
like we are a game that embraces trade.
Yeah,
right?
well,
So-
I think the DNA of Path of Exile 1 is very much that like it is a game about economy and trade.
100%.
And
So, yeah.
for some people, getting rich is their their main motivator.
100%. So effectively, yeah. So I mean that will absolutely be a factor. And look, like I think that the feeling of that will probably end up feeling quite similar to PoE1 in that regard.
Yeah.
I think that's what that's the type of game we're making.
Yeah. Do you think it's that said though? Do you think it is in some ways better for a solo self-found sort of experience?
I mean, I simply because, again, as we talked about, we're dropping a lot more currency that we expect you to use on gear, as opposed to save till end game for one, and then by end game, like we don't have Kirak mods costing, that kind of stuff that all costs chaos, and you don't have like the meta mods costing divines and all that, right? They're all different items. You're like, I want meta mod crafting. There's a ritual. I'm
know where
going
to
get
them
it
as well,
right? So you're not just like having to. I'm blocked behind this thing because I need so many divines and I can't get that because I'm solo self-found, and farming divines is not exactly beyond trivial. Yeah. So there's a number of ways there where I'd say it is honestly a much better solo self-found experience. But each to their own. That to be seen, and
And there'll be a separate solo self-found mode, presumably, even potentially beta launch or in the future.
It is our intention to have hardcore and solo self-found.
We'll have both of them.
Right, cool.
Yeah, I wouldn't play hardcore for your first round, honestly, because you're likely to die. Like once you learn the boss mechanics, it should be fine. But
someone's gonna.
First time, it's gonna be tricky.
Couch co-op hardcore, and you get to see your friend die right next to you. That's the true dream.
Actually, hang on, wait. In couch co-op hardcore, do we still lock the camera so you can't walk away from your friend?
No, we put you back to solo.
You back to solo?
Yeah,
okay, great.
right.
Good. That's good to know. It's like you have
to have a mourning period of about 30 seconds.
Right.
But you're just like, all right, you can go home now. We're like, go.
See ya.
What do you do?
Yeah, that's a devastating moment. I did lose my place there. I think we mentioned the co-op support and everything. And we'll scroll down and take some of the additional questions here. Excellent, thanks. Will there be a penalty for individual party member dying when grouping up for bosses on that note then? It seems weird that the boss straight up resets when playing solo, but when playing in a group, nothing happens if a party member dies.
So tell us about the rules
now
that we have, because I know you've changed them recently.
So bosses are obviously harder for having more people.
Yep.
Less crowd controls, things like obviously more life. And I'm not just saying double life, more than double life, right? It does get more than twice as hard, or more than N players as hard. So yes, you could argue, okay, we have reviving as an advantage. Well, yes, it does. It does take time to revive, and if your friend dies early and you're unable to revive them because you're constantly being interrupted, well,
from what I saw, it's pretty hard to pull off.
You're not having a fun time.
Get a big stun or something.
Another change that we made recently is, of course, for each revived. Between each set of checkpoints, every time you have to revive them, the revive takes longer subsequent times.
Oh. So that's important because it just means that if you're like, you can't revive spam anymore because it's going to take longer and longer each time. But then when you go to a checkpoint, that resets. So you're back to normal
now,
again.
Now, in endgame maps, you cannot revive each other. Death is a consequence.
Yeah. I was going to ask actually about like endgame maps and what is the rule for dying in endgame map? Is it one portal deal now, not 6 portals?
Well, you still have 6 portals so you can have your party members, but death.
And you can leave and come back as long as you don't die. So you can take items out, but a death will end that map for you.
And to remind people, the if you like log out or the server crashes or something like not that that's going to happen, then the game pauses. So when you boot the game back up and log back in, you'll be still in your map, right?
And also, even we've also now have it so that if you just Alt F4 the game at a random time, you'll actually, even if you come back like the next day. Because for example, you might have rage quit. You will appear back at the checkpoint you were at. So if you are like fighting a boss, you die a bunch of times. You're like, crap. Alt F4. You come back, you're going to be right there at the boss checkpoint again.
That part is campaign specific because there are no checkpoints in maps.
Yeah, non-maps. But for the campaign though, and that honestly has helped a lot. Like there were so many. I think it really did cause new players to have problems in PoE1 where they felt like they just lost track of where the hell they even were when they came back after a session. If like they might have not got waypoints for certain times or things like that. Like you now can't have the situation where you log back in and you're like, I forgot like 3 waypoints in a row and now I'm like freaking miles away from where I was, which I think happened to new players fairly frequently.
I'm glad in a world where everyone's becoming a Souls-like that you guys didn't do the running back to the boss segment of gameplay,
right.
and you just kind of jump back in,
Yeah,
and have another crack. So
effectively, like that's nice to just have the save checkpoints to your character, which I think is a nice one.
Were there any other mechanics around there? Reviving, well, obviously in hardcore, you're dead. That's the drill.
It's irrelevant at that point.
So your maps almost embraces a kind of semi-hardcore mentality there, where there is actual cost. Like, we went through so many iterations here, where it's like, okay, like, the moment that you have to spend something of economic value to do the attempt, hence a map item, and especially if it's got breaches and all this content that's coming from precursor tablets, all of this stuff is worth stuff. So you all of a sudden have heaps of stuff on the line, and then you don't want to be in a position where you're like, I need to bring in some people to do this because I'm not going to risk that value. So that's why we just were like, in maps, no reviving. It's just like, yeah, sure, you still can always bring in any context someone way more powerful than you to carry things, right? That's the benefit of multiplayer. But feeling like you have to do this thing because then they can just keep reviving you so you can get all the rewards. Like, we're trying to get away from all of that. Otherwise, you get this weird thing where like you're often always too scared to do the thing. Yeah. Now you're scared, but everyone's scared and it's fine, and you don't feel like you're like, okay, you have to go in with a sense of confidence to like, I can definitely do this thing. And so it's just a little bit less fear when it comes to all of a sudden doing that.
That's much better in the context of the fact that you can pause the game if your cat's on fire, or if the server crashes or something, that you just paused and you can jump back in as well. You're failing because of your own faults.
Yep. Now, it's worth noting in multiplayer, we do have a thing, of course, with respawn at checkpoints as an option. So if a player dies and you don't want to die, you don't want to finish the fight out, you can both choose to respawn at checkpoint, and then it will just create a new instance. Cool. You don't have to die to do it, and you don't have to log out and do any shenanigans like that. You can just press escape, hit respawn at checkpoint. It'll ask other players to confirm, and then it moves you all to the new area.
Cool. Excellent. I didn't want to go super on it because we've definitely talked about it before, but click to move versus WSD, it's definitely been asked about a bit. So there's been plenty of reports about WSD being amazing. Personally, I've been using it a ton and really enjoying it. I know you've said a lot of people around the office have given it a try and adapted to that, but it has raised the point for people that feel like they're still very much against that for whatever reason, or maybe that they literally only have one hand and and want to use click to move still. How does it stack up? How does click to move still stack up now?
I think honestly it's fine. Like, it's not been a problem.
There was a time where every time I go to sit down at a developer's computer, they'd be in WSD, and just because it's a little bit easier to move around again or whatever. But lately, I'd say now it's back to almost every designer's computer I sit back down at to go play. They're back in click to move.
Interesting.
Yep. It's gone full tilt the other way.
Interesting.
And I'm always like, change it back.
I wonder why that is.
But even watching Octavian play on click to move,
he's a click to move player.
He's 100% click to move. He is
there.
very proficient with that.
Yeah.
With it, like,
that'll be reassuring for, I think, some of the people that are worried about being forced into WASD, even though it is obviously playing so well by all accounts. That's very good then. Yeah, and Octavian's often doing the demonstrations for your live things too, so you'll be able to see that even.
I have to force him to play WSD sometimes because I'm like, I think the Mercenary looks so much better with WSD just visually. I'll tell him to...
It does feel very good on the Mercenary. That kind of like stalking through, especially with that kind of like preparational tactical play style. It's good. I'm loving it so far. We did already talk about the skin transfers. Could we scroll down to any additional questions that we have? I feel like I don't even know how long we've been going for, but
I'm
feeling
it's a while. We're getting
creep in at this point.
Yeah, exactly. We've been rolling.
People asking if there's going to be anything like challenges or challenge rewards in the early access.
Not at first, no.
We will do it later though.
Did I ask about races, events, and private leagues?
I think not initially, but we will do it later for sure.
Cool.
I think I'm not sure what happened because I think the issue was that the private league interface was like on the PoE1 site, and we had to do some work and something like that. It wouldn't be far away though. Like, it won't take us that long before we get to it. Like,
I can't exactly remember either, but it wouldn't be. Private leagues in particular wouldn't be far away.
Yeah. So I mean, we'll have them, just not like right initially potentially.
And I think I did miss this actually. So cluster jewels are a thing or not a thing? Are they've been kind of replaced by those?
Yeah,
radius?
we replaced them with that almost like rollable timeless jewel kind of thing.
Yeah, that's cool.
At least for now, there's like so much passive tree there, and the jewels accomplish the kind of off-build thing anyway.
You hardly need to add the extra passive trees on your passive trees
Yes,
yet.
yes, we do. Yeah,
That's after launch.
We made the passive tree implicitly bigger, so you know.
The cluster jewels are in the tree already.
That's again, I talk about like year 3 features. That's around a like year 3 to year 5 feature as well. So
Yeah. We got another decade of what we had with Path of Exile 1 to look forward to for Path of Exile 2, hopefully, before we start worrying about Path of Exile 3, maybe.
Jeez.
You go, just start thinking about that.
it's a little while.
So I guess to just finish us off for today then, do you guys have a recommendation of what is the best class to play in the beta?
I mean, that's a very hard one. Honestly, like so.
There's so many choices now.
There are. So let me. Well, okay. If we're going by the numbers, if we go by player satisfaction reports on per class, we break it down from the betas.
I mean, this is good technical information here.
Then that means the monk is very interesting because the monk is the class that dies the most often. But it's also the class that when people play it, they have the highest satisfaction level by a very, very tiny margin that compares to the others.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it is like glass cannon, like it's very fast, but you have to you have to retreat and move in and out. So,
I fell in love with the monk playing it. It looks like it's gotten a little better.
Yeah, that's interesting. But I think if you're a new player, then the mercenary, if you're like used to shooters and stuff, I think playing the mercenary could be a good win. Like I really love that class.
I don't know. Cool. I've been loving the mercenary, but to me, it feels like you need to really be considering each engagement a lot more. It's a bit more tactical.
Maybe I don't know. Like I like it. I really like
to correct if you.
But honestly, like I mean, I go through favorite classes all the time. Whenever I change to play a different class, it becomes my favorite.
That's my current favorite.
So it's just whatever I'm playing tends to be the thing. So right now I'm doing a mercenary playthrough, so that's probably why I'm into that. But It's, I'm not sure if you've got a similar thing.
No, you were talking about the numbers as well. It was interesting that Monk and then Warrior had the highest satisfaction levels.
Warrior's next, by the way, technically, if you're looking for...
That's pretty good. That's 2 melee classes.
Exactly.
That's a win.
Yeah, that's something going on. I mean, they were dying a lot more at the time, but...
It's such a change from, especially early Path of Exile 1. It's gotten a little better in modern days, but still...
I mean, I just have a real desire to freeze time, so I just want to go sorceress and just go. I don't know what
it's
skills
good to get some
I'll play.
sorceress love. I feel like she's not going to be getting enough attention.
I don't know what skills I'll play, but I definitely just want to be able to freeze time. So it just feels cool.
All right. So you could be playing a crossbow build anyway.
Yeah, I might be a crossbow time freezer. I don't know. We'll see what's going on.
Yeah, all right. I noted that our mercenaries were very different as well. I was playing full grenader. You were.
I was doing the freeze shotgun.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
I don't know. Some sort of monk trigger build, obviously. It's always just going to be fun to play around.
They have so many of
with
those stacking effects, the wind and the ice coming off it, and the ascendancies showed some more as well. Oof.
Just see how far that can be pushed and how many spells can I get to trigger per second.
Monk does seem good for that. Alrighty. Well, thank you very much for your time, both of you. For I don't even know how long.
That was a mammoth session. I think we're coming up to 1 o'clock here, so
there's still lots to talk about. But I think we just need some time to digest.
For sure. So thankfully we didn't have everyone saying patch notes when this time.
So good.
So that means we can actually have a conversation.
There's no pressure on us to wrap it up.
Yeah, exactly. That's good.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the Q&A.
They want patch notes now.
Patch notes.
Well done.
It's not a patch.
Thank you.
It's a launch.
Exactly.
Where's the launch notes?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. And thank you very much.
Thanks heaps. Appreciate it. Yeah. It's been an epic journey. It's kind of surreal. And it's only the start of another journey, really. So
that's it.
Yeah.
Can't wait to play.
It's cool.
Excellent. I mean, I'm going to go play more now, but...
Yeah, it's true.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I got to go fix bosses going up elevators and...
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm just pre-bug testing. So.
All right.
I assume we've faded out and cut.
Hopefully.
You never know.
Hopefully.